Start recording. Okay. Bye, stream. I'm going off. All right. YouTuber problems. Okay. We are now recording the podcast. Seagull introduced in saying that he is still disappointed. What about everybody else? What do you think the year in review is so far? Because for me personally, I was hyped at the way that they were handling the cadence of changes in the beta. The balance of the game felt amazing. I was super pumped for the game. And then it came out and they sort of, everything screeched to a grinding halt with the updates and everything. And I didn't really care about PvE that much anyway. So I was very excited that the PvP was getting attention. But then that sort of changed a bit. And I was super disappointed as well because the things I was hanging my hat on changed significantly. But they most recently put a hotfix in. So I'm kind of in like a lukewarm period myself. We'll maybe toss it over to Flats, who I know has been very emotional about the state of the game, up and down. So what do you think about the year in review for you?
I think it's so close to being good. That's what makes me, that's what, like, that's what I'm mad about. Cause like we all know it's, or at least I feel like most of us know it's like mostly balance issues like that keep things from being as good as they could be, at least in my opinion. And leading up to it, like beta 1 and beta 2, like beta 1 I thought was like probably the best where you gotten close to like balance wise. Support needed some help, but like DPS and tank were super fun. And then beta 2 happened and it's like half the tank roster became like unplayable except Jugger Queen was just dominating, so you couldn't tell. And it was like, I was like, wait a minute, like this is a little weird. Maybe we'll fix this when Jugger Queen gets, tuned down a little bit. When the game comes out, we can fix the other problems. It'll be fine. It'll be all good. And then the game hits, and then it's just the competitive side has been very stale. Content's amazing. Game's performing really well. Game is fun. Quick play is amazing. I've been enjoying quick play so much. Also trying to keep editing as little as possible for you, and I'm struggling a little bit. But like, yeah, just like arcade and like the Halloween event was awesome and a lot of that kind of stuff. It's just the weak link balance again. But the hotfix was nice. So I'm with you on that. I'm on the lukewarm kind of feel right now, at least.
You know what's funny about beta 1 is that like while I think I agree with you, like beta 1 was super fun, it did feel really good. But there's a level of, I think, maybe rose-tinted glasses there as well, because people complain now about like, oh, Sojourn's so strong, she's still not nerfed enough, she needs more nerfs. It's like, do you guys remember how good she was in beta 1? Like, technically speaking, she was way better back then. Like, even like alpha, she was unreal. Beta 1, and she was already nerfed from alpha. So you guys, the public don't even realize how good she was back then. While I do think that beta 1 was insane, I also think like it's interesting that it was like a really good period of the game, but at the same time, you could argue that in some cases, it like can't be balanced right. Because we're saying heroes like Sojourn are crazy now. It's like, well, what was she in beta 1 then? Because she was insane back then, right? Technically speaking.
Correct me if I'm wrong, though. She was bad when she first came out, and then they buffed her to make the railgun bigger, like in the second half of beta 1.
There was a round of like nerfs and buffs, but like part of the reason why she didn't get played as much back, at least I'll just say from the pro level, like her Soldier was dominating at the time. So I think like she was kind of under the radar because Soldier 76 was so much better at the time, based on the fact that you could stack the movement speed passive. We had that back in the day with the sprint, so he was just zooming around, just stuff like that. But I guess my greater point is like beta 1 also had the much stronger Genji compared to now. The much more fun Doomfist. You could maybe argue better Doomfist, but like in a healthier way. Like there was a bunch of stuff that was certain heroes being stronger, and I don't know if that made beta 1 better or maybe it was just a freshness. I think there's a lot of freshness involved as well. It's like, here's a brand new experience. Most people have only played 6v6. Now we have a 5v5 experience. It's totally brand new. And also people still learning the game, so no one's like super insane in Sojourn just yet. So a lot of that stuff went under the radar. I think that's all part of it, but I did think beta 1 was fun, yeah.
What was the period where, I can't remember, but was it alpha 2 or something? Was there a second alpha? I can't remember now, but there was a period where before Sojourn, I feel there was multiple comps that could be played in OWL, but I seem to recall we didn't get to play that very much, basically. So I felt that there was this glorious period where there was multiple things viable at the same time, and then we went away with that with the new heroes.
You guys didn't. I don't think you guys played the Alpha 2 because it was basically the Alpha ended, but it kept on going for Overwatch League because they still needed to scrim and practice. So they kept the Alpha going for that specifically. And so like you could consider that to be like Alpha 2. And I don't know if there were like, I think there might have been at least one further patch during that time. If I remember correctly, this is quite a long way ago now, but you know, if we're talking about Overwatch 2 chronologically and starting all the way back then, yeah, that did happen.
Right. So a question I would have is, do we think that Overwatch 2 has performed better balance-wise than Overwatch 1 thus far? Or does it look exactly the same in terms of we have periods of really oppressive metas? I suppose the timelines are now crunched a bit. It's not like we have a year of a terrible meta, but in terms of at least my feeling for it, the, let's say, targeted hits and misses with directed patches of how they're trying to balance the game feels about the same, of the decision making being up and down and us not really knowing what to expect. Because of that period we're speaking about, when multiple comps were viable, that's when I had so much enthusiasm for the game, because I was like, oh, I thought this game needed bans to be balanced, but okay, I guess I was wrong, and they've got all these comps getting played at the highest level, but then add another hero here, add another hero there, not really sure how to balance it. It kind of went off the rails, and it's been pretty rough, especially with the grand finals having only 5 heroes get played the entire time on that new patch that came through. And then realistically, I think if we met like a week ago, we'd be even madder because the hotfix that came through, I would say, is like decent, but that's more of what I expect. I'll toss this to anybody. I do want to get Seagull's take at some point on this entire idea on balance. It seems like this hasn't been the forefront of your view of what the game is or what you want to have the game. So maybe chime in a bit about everything we're speaking about here, and then maybe expand a bit more on what I want to get to the PvE stuff as well, a little bit more in depth, Seagull. So let me know your thoughts.
I mean, is the balance bad? Who do you consider the balance bad for? This is the fun question, is it not?
Yeah, good point. So what do you think? Like, has there been periods where you would have called the balance bad, like in your opinion?
No, it is for us. That's the question I'm asking, though, is who should a developer balance around? Is it going to be us as GM plus, or is it going to be your average player? And I think striking that balance is really difficult for any dev. And also doesn't help that the hotfix system was broken, in which they directly came out and said we would have nerfed Sojourn if we were able to, but we couldn't because the hotfix system was down for most of season 1. And so I kind of cut them some slack when it comes specifically to Sojourn. I don't actually care that much. Now, what I'm going to start paying attention to, if you really want to start judging, I think, Blizzard's capability to balance and a new 5v5 setting and Overwatch 2 and stuff, wait until this season plus next season. Those are the 2 seasons I would consider to pay a lot more attention to, specifically because season 1, they did come out and say, we actually couldn't nerf her. We actually, due to the hotfix system being broken, we had tech issues from launch that kind of screwed over a lot of our hotfix stuff to tweak a lot of those characters. And when it comes to Overwatch League stuff and metas, honestly, I don't care. Overwatch League is so far separated from the rest of the game. I think looking at some of that stuff is pointless because a lot of that stuff, even now, I would imagine they probably use. I don't watch competitive Overwatch, and I haven't for many years, but I would say when it comes to that, they probably still play Winston Reaper Sojourn, Kiriko Mercy stuff, or Kiriko Lucio. All that stuff was very common, very popular, still is probably stupidly good, but there's always going to be that baseline level of teamwork and cooperation that's required on a competitive level that you don't see every day on ladder. And so because there is that degree of separation, you have to really. When I play Overwatch every day, the biggest and most annoying thing is going to be a Sojourn Mercy Pocket who are really, really good. And that is 90% of my complaints about this game. And Hog. But that's also whatever. They can't. Also, the Hog thing is a little bit different of a story too, right? They came out immediately and said, oh yeah, we're doing this hotfix patch. By the way, we want to nerf Hog, but the patch we did had another tech issue, and all of us are about to leave for the holidays, so we can't fix it right now. So we buffed everyone else for a second, then we'll come back to it in 2 weeks. They're being very open about it. I respect the transparency and honesty that the devs have had so far.
Gotcha. So I would say that the difference between high skill and low tier thing matters a lot for this game. And the thing I like best about Overwatch 2, and I'm curious what you guys think about this, is the big boons of this game that we sort of take for granted at this point. So a few of them that I'll list out. 5v5, as well as maybe removing a lot of annoying elements of the game. This is something that I did hang my hat on, but now that we're all used to it, it almost feels like it's taken for granted a bit, where because so many things in the game do require skill, I think as you go up that skill curve as a new player, you will feel like you can play things that are suited to you. But the thing that starts to get oppressive, I would say, is how quickly does that ceiling hit where you just have to play Sojourn, right? And feel like that is so oppressive. And obviously it does affect streamers the most, but that's what I'm most concerned about, I suppose, is because I do want this game to succeed at a higher competitive level, both as an esport to watch, because I enjoy watching it, and I think they should want people to enjoy watching it too. Something that I noticed with a lot of new players, and I want to keep kind of getting into the perspective of new players weaved into this conversation a bit. A lot of them are like, why is there only 5 characters getting played when they saw the grand finals? Who was going to speak?
Yeah, I was going to say, like, yeah, look, speaking to what Seagull said earlier, it's like, it's 100% the case that, like, whatever is our meta is like not really representative of what the general meta is in the game for everybody else. But at the same time, I think everyone needs to then also take a step back and then not use Al as an example. Like, well, clearly the game is imbalanced because look at that. It's just like, well, you can't have it both ways here. It's like, to me, it's going to be mostly one or the other. Although, like, if you want to make a general statement about the game, if you just think overall it's unbalanced at all levels, you could probably say that. But, like, anyway, that's, to me, just as a general statement on balance, I think it's always going to be difficult to balance for all levels. And it's been kind of reinforced seeing some of the balance philosophy that's like, Sojourn's a great example because the devs specifically came out and said, what was it? She's not performing that well in lower levels, so we don't feel like she's needing of that much of a nerf. There was that, and then, you know, just what is the philosophy there? Because then it's like, well, I don't know that you can really balance this game that will satisfy everybody, because you have a hero that is very very well performing at a very high level, but in the lower level, apparently it's not very well performing at all. But at the same time as well, like, to go back to what you were saying, Frito, it's like, well, at what point do you have to play a hero like that to succeed? And I would say, like, you know, if what Blizzard is saying is true, then probably not until a higher rank, because supposedly the win rate is pretty low at the lower ranks anyway, right? Like, I mean, based on what they're saying.
Flats, any thoughts on this subject?
It's actually such a interesting thing to talk about because, like, for example, is balance good across all ranks and even like certain characters? If you're like bronze to plat, you probably think like Reinhardt's really good. You probably think like, oh, this tank's awesome. Like, you have 650 HP or 625 health, 12,000 barrier. Anyone gets near you, take your big hammer and you swing on them. They can't, you know, nobody's hitting you with headshots or running at you. But it's also the same thing as like why you see, like, you know, on TikTok, all the brand new players think Moira is insane. You know, they all think Moira is nuts. But, you know, and I'm sure we'll get into later that blog post that came out that they overestimated how good they thought new players were. And it's like they're like all at bronze, like, or low bronze. And that makes a lot of sense because Overwatch is a game that's been out for 6 years. And we have 6 years of knowledge that we've built on. Like, even if you went from like to Valorant today, and like Valorant's only been out for a couple, like 3 years, you'd have to have a significant climb to catch up to like where they are, like, in knowledge. And Overwatch is even further beyond that at this point. So like this new influx of players, they're just completely not connected the same way that we are. So our problems and their problems are almost not going to align for years, I don't think. But at the same time, though, I think the good question is, you know, are we really the target of balance anymore? And I think that they're not going to leave us out in the cold. But it, you know, this is something I said like a couple weeks ago before the hotfix is, you know, if that is the case, it is a little bit scary. Because a lot of people do have that feeling that there is disconnect for like what's Sojourn's big problem. Sojourn's big problem is the one shot. Like, that's what's the scary thing about Sojourn more than anything. and lower ranked players probably don't hit the one shot that often. That's where her value is in the one tap. So, you know, like what philosophy are they going for? Are they solving that? I honestly don't know, but I'm kind of in the middle again. I'm kind of just like in a little bit of a wait and see. But I won't lie to you, it does feel a little bit kind of stale at the moment. I don't know. Feels like the same from last season.
I fundamentally don't think you can balance for all levels. I think like no matter what you do, you balance for one level, it'll probably negatively impact a different skill tier in the game somewhere. And I think that's been one of the biggest mistakes from a balancing philosophy standpoint from the devs for both Overwatch games.
I love this matchmaking blog because I think it opens up a perspective that we just have to face that we didn't really necessarily have in Overwatch 1. Because if you think about the way Overwatch 1 was, it was a boxed product, so you had to invest more to get in. So like the barrier of entry was higher, so therefore you're probably somewhat more interested in the game and the things it was selling, like let's say teamwork or whatever, is like a thing you were buying into and sort of expected with Overwatch 2 just based on how it was marketed. But with Overwatch 1. With Overwatch 2 as a free-to-play game, I feel like there's a new generation of gamers that I, myself, as I age and as we all age, doesn't have the like, maybe how many of them have played TF2, for example? Whereas Overwatch 1, it felt like a big percentage of them, and you guys in this call came from TF2 a bit. So there was a shared knowledge of what that kind of game was. Whereas now, I feel like we have a big player base that came from battle royales, specifically, Fortnite or Warzone or things like that. Apex is another one. And rather than Overwatch 1 stepping into the military shooter genre to be like an update to TF2, Overwatch 2 is in the context of all of these other more single-minded player focused, where you're surviving against the world. Whereas in Overwatch, it's a hero-based shooter, as they say, in the team-based hero shooter in the blog. That's kind of a new experience for a lot of players. And what they explain in that blog, as Flats described, is that the weighting of how many players we have that belong in a skill tier is just lower than it was going to be in that more dedicated hardcore audience of Overwatch 1. And it's going to take a while for them to learn and figure out just simple things about the game, like let's say maybe regrouping or how to combo ultimates or how to counter ultimates or where to position, all of that. One of my favorite examples of this is when you saw someone like Dr. Disrespect play Overwatch 1, right? And he's as playing Cassidy, and it just like, why is nothing dying? And he's not regrouping with his team, and he's 1v6ing, and he's like, I can't do any damage. This sucks. What is this game? And he's used to playing COD or a military shooter like that, where you get an angle, have your little cover, and you at any point can achieve an elimination. Whereas in Overwatch, a lot of it is just timing and syncing with your team to have any effect. And as much as people were worried about Overwatch 2 feeling too shootery, as we have learned and how it's been balanced over time, there's a big hero shooter element and teamwork element that in order to do anything, you got to kind of engage with the game that way. And so you guys are really convincing me, I got to say, that I came into this conversation a lot more harsh on Blizzard and upset and saying, well, fix the game for us. But the truth is, as they're kind of showing us with this data, these blog posts as well, super nerdy. That's a huge change as well, the way they're communicating about the game. Pages and pages of dense information for us to look at that I'm thankful for. But that sort of changes the direction of what the game is and the personality of it, and something I didn't anticipate, because I really wanted the game to go free to play. So I was happy with all these new players coming, but getting them up to speed and teaching them, like, maybe your Moira montage isn't as impressive as you think it is, as you posted to TikTok. So we can kind of talk about, if I struck up any chords with any of you about like the player base that we have or how Blizzard can handle this. Does anybody want to jump in? I'll open it to the floor.
I will. I mean, I do think there is a lot to be pessimistic about, though. Because I'm open about the fact that, Blizzard is trying to be balance for both high level and low level play, right? And that's cool and all, but it doesn't change the fact that they've completely failed on the seasonal identity part when it comes to balance changes from season 1 to season 2. Because you can say all we want that, we need a balanced Sojourn around low and high level play. We don't want to nerf her too much. Yeah, she technically one shots on a headshot, 195 though, surely that'll be enough, right? And it's like, well, is that, I do think that doesn't make sense. A lot of these balance changes don't actually make much sense. They make sense to a degree, but also when it comes to the whole seasonal thing, right? Does anyone in this goes into what Flash was saying earlier about something being it felt stale from season 1 to season 2. The moment I started playing season 2 and they didn't nerf Sojourn into the ground, I immediately realized that they were balancing largely around low level play. And so I immediately intuitively understood this is not going to change until at least mid-January to later, because they're going to go on vacation. They're going to do like one little hot fix, and what they do, they're like, oh, power slide, nerf it by 1 second, something like that. It's like, oh, okay, yeah, sure, yeah, that'll definitely change this. Yeah, of course. In many ways, I actually think I'm more pessimistic than most of you when it comes to the fundamental flaws behind Overwatch in a lot of ways, because I recognize the game for what it is. And the things that you guys were discussing sort of around core identity of the game, right? You go, Call of Duty is a shooter game. Valorant is a Counter-Strike style tac shooter. So what is Overwatch? Right? There's no clear fundamental ground, right, for what vision everyone should have for the game at all, right? And so because of that, that's where a lot of the problems lie for me as a player. Because immediately when I play the game, what I want from Overwatch, what the developers want, and what the average player wants are all very, very different, because Overwatch as a video game supports so many different playstyles that other games don't. They're very distinct usually, right? If I go play Apex, I'm not expecting Hammond to start rolling through the game, right? That's not how that works. But in Overwatch, that's a thing. And so because of that, you have to go in with expectations. And my expectations are, I expect Blizzard to always prioritize their business, which is going to be balancing around low-level players using mostly data which takes a long time to get in many cases. And so when when we started this show, you kind of asked me like, oh, has it been above or below your expectations? It has been above my expectations and how it's performing, but about what I expected in terms of balance. I don't expect balance. I was actually shocked that they even started hotfixing. Because when we first got started and they started doing the seasonal stuff, they said, we're going to do one mid-season patch and you're going to have one patch on the new season. And that's it. That's all you're ever going to get. And then now they came out and said, oh, actually, we wanted to actually do a little bit more. And I appreciate that. So, but as for the changes and, the impact of those changes and everything else, I think they have missed the mark when it comes to a seasonal identity. In my view, there should be, there's like a certain nuance here where, you don't want to just nerf everything that was ever popular in the first season, but you do want to significantly tweak it so it doesn't feel exactly the same. And I feel like they've missed that from season 1 to season 2.
That sounds a little, I don't want to put any words in your mouth, but that sounds strangely like balancing for the sake of balancing, though. In a way, it's like if you just want to like shake the boat a little bit so it's different. Is that what I'm kind of getting? Because there is also this idea of like, do you believe in a potential of perfect balance? At least the theory of it. I know in practicality it's probably not, you can't reach that, but the theory of like, if you could reach a perfect state of balance, then you actually don't need to touch the game further, right? Because hypothetically, if you've nailed it, you don't have to, the next season, you don't have to change it again. Because if the game is balanced, and let's define what balance is, I would define it as a state of like pure diversity where like everything is kind of viable, which again, this is so hypothetical because like we can't reach that, but as close as we can to that. If we got to that stage where, let's say we went back to beta 1 and it was super fresh and everything seemed viable, you don't really need to balance for the sake of balancing, no? Or am I crazy? Because like it does seem like when you're talking about identities for seasons, it sounds a little bit that like you want them to balance for the sake of balancing just to change the identity. I
want Seagull to respond, but I'll just translate this a little bit. I think another way to say it is map-based meta. And then another point I want to add is they also add another hero. So that automatically changes things up. But so with that context, Seagull, what do you think? And we'll have Flats go after that.
I think I'm going to use Blizzard's line. Do you remember, what did Blizzard say when they weren't patching near the end of Overwatch 1?
They were working towards the sequel, right?
Oh, okay. But also because the game was pretty balanced and they weren't adding content. So what were they going to tweak with balance patches on a regular basis? It's sort of what he's saying, right? But the problem here is the point of new content and continuous seasonal content versus nothing. If everything stays the same, you can actually balance it out really, really well. You actually can. If nothing is changing, you can fine tune it and refine it for like 6 months to a year whatever, and you could actually get that down really,
They could
really well.
accidentally get it too.
Accidentally, yeah.
Because I would argue, like, sorry for people that I'm going to make this reference, but like mid-season Manners tournament this year for Al was like one of the best patches possible. Huge diversity in meta choices, lots of different things were viable. It was like as almost close to perfect as I'd ever seen. You know, outside of like some other rare cases, maybe in Overwatch 1. So I'm saying like, you know, they could accidentally get there as well. But then obviously the beta 2 patch came out, Junker Queen came out, and it just ruined everything.
I do want to make one very, very, and I think we have to keep making this, and I'm gonna keep bringing this up over and over again, though, is when we talk about metas, we talk about all this stuff. It does not apply to basically anyone outside of the highest level of rank who are truly trying to get good and like go competitive. I mean, dude, I one-trick Symmetra for the last week and a half, and I got to like rank 20. Is that, if I could go that far, does that mean that Symmetra is terrible? Like, no. You could, you know what I mean? You could go very, very far with off-meta picks. And so when we get so focused on the nuanced takes and the nuanced discussion of Overwatch League or contenders or this or that, it's so difficult to talk about. And this is why there's always such a
It's just a
huge
snapshot.
disconnect.
It's just a snapshot of like, you know, if you push it to the limit, like does it just get to like, no, you just refine it down to one thing. Because typically speaking, if it's like really stale at the top level, it's probably going to be stale elsewhere too.
Well, let me moderate this real quick. I would say I agree with you, Seagull, actually. I mean, I think my whole channel is based on this exact point. So I will say for sure the ranked meta matters more, 100%. But I think we can say there is obvious ranked meta characters that are overly obnoxious, and Hog is one of them. Now, luckily, they changed the balance of some of the counterplay with him, but he's still pretty obnoxious for me anyway, and or at least my teammates, as they peek him in a wide open angle and he gets free kills everywhere. So I want to know Flats' opinion on all this, especially because I know he's not a fan of Hog either, I think.
So sorry to bring it way back. I just was very interested in listening because, you know, I haven't got to hear some other, you know, some opinions of people in this call. But to bring it back to earlier about the balance patch that came up, a little hotfix, you know, I actually somewhat agree that it's like, you know, it's scary though. I don't like it, but I agree. It's like, you know, maybe we aren't the target focus. But then you see stuff like in that balance patch, Orisa getting like hard buffed, and it's like Orisa is like gonna be that character that's going to destroy Hog. You know, like Orisa is going to be the person that shuts that down, and that is a fundamental change, because like that's a fundamental understanding that Hog and Orisa are going to match up with each other. And with the new tank, or with the new passive where you're constantly counter swapping, which I don't like, which we can get to that later. But you could, if someone walks out on Hog, I don't know, say you walked out on like Sigma or something. Sigma versus Hog is like not bad, but you could go Orisa and ruin that guy's whole day. And that's awesome. And like that kind of shows that like they're ready to like make changes that are like for that high level play. Because I think you pick Orisa, like a lot of like the lower ranked players we're talking about, like at the beginning of Overwatch 1, or sorry, at the beginning of Overwatch 2 Season 1, that Orisa was really strong because she's really tanky. But she wasn't good because that's all she was. She just stood there until she ran out of buttons to press, and then she died. But now she has buttons to press and she kills things, so it's awesome. So it's like they kind of are balancing for low ranks, but then there's these like moments where it's like, wait, like Hog is still like really oppressive and sucks to play against, but it's dealable now. You can't deal with the Sojourn one tap across the map from the Mercy Pocket. Like that's just not fun. Especially if you're a tank player or a support player, the only thing, like if you're a DPS player, you can go Widow or go Sojourn Versa and win the duel. Is that fun, or is that like good gameplay? I'd argue not. But on like the support role or the tank role, you felt a lot of times hopeless. But Hog was like good at like, if the Sojourn got close enough, right, you could kind of deal with her. But so I think that's why Hog and his survivability and a lot of the things was good with it. But now at the tank role, if the Hog's the problem, now you go Orisa. And it's like now you get some options. And then Ana got buffed too. So even though cleanse is still amazing, the 4 seconds of punishment time is significantly better versus Hog than the 3 seconds. It feels like there's a bigger window. So you see these like moments to shine where it's like, wait, do they actually know? Do they maybe they know. Maybe you know, maybe things will change, and then the next balance patch comes and that dies. But it's like this never-ending cycle where it feels like, you know, maybe they aren't making changes for us, but it's like then you see these little hopes and these little glimmers, like, wait, maybe they are. So I don't know. I'm a little bit out. I think it's right to probably just wait a little bit. I mean, right now, like, you know, they're on break. Like, we knew this was coming. Nothing we could really do about it right now. But I personally enjoy being able to deal with Hog a lot more, like myself, you know, which is why I enjoyed the first beta. Is like I felt like I had control of the game again. Like I didn't feel like it was like, okay, we need someone to swap like Brig, or we need someone to swap BAP, or else we're gonna lose this game because like we're playing double shield and they're playing double shield and they're playing BAP. We're playing Ana. Our heals will not sustain because we're playing grouped up versus grouped up. They will beat us over time. You know what I mean? Like it didn't feel like it was in your own hands anymore. So I'm a little bit more, you know, I'm a little bit more on the wait and see, but I'm hopeful. It's that we still balance top to down. But I think there's some real merit in the idea of it's not going to be that way. Also, there was one other thing on the second half of that. I kind of forget though. I don't know if it was like with Overwatch League or whatever, but you said it, Frito. Is I'm starting to kind of agree a little bit. Is like, you know, ranked, like looking more towards ranked versus Overwatch League actually might not be a terrible idea. Because Overwatch League will always break things and they will always look towards it. And then that ends up becoming the ranked meta a lot of times, where it's like, you know, like everyone saw Overwatch League, it's like, oh, this comp's really strong. So everyone starts playing it in ranked. And like over time that they just end up reflecting anyways. So if you balance mostly around ranked, and even if Overwatch League breaks like once in a while, like it'll become fixed very quickly, because then high level ranked play will start playing it, and then it'll trickle its way down the ladder. And then that's how you get, you know, players a month after everyone else was complaining about Sojourn start saying, oh, Sojourn's really annoying to play against, even though the data supposedly didn't show that.
Right. And so I want to transition this a little bit to possible solutions that they can think about. And to me, I really think that if we want this game to be competitively viable, we're going to have to start the hero ban or draft discussion again seriously, because they'll need to balance the game so that there's options for everyone. But if they ever expect it to be the case that there's a top tier meta that we enjoy or look at, or even to change the, as Seagull argues for his hero ban solution, to change your interaction as a player with a given meta, especially as new characters get added. Because I don't think these concepts are so difficult to discern to be like indescribable, okay? It's not easy to translate, but let me try to give an example of what I mean, where Kiriko, in I think the pros' hands, looked a lot scarier when everyone was playing around the Suzu in a coordinated unit. Now that's something that you're just not going to expect to happen. Like Dallas Fuel, they would pop it and run in together, knowing the invulnerability frames they had to abuse. That's not something I anticipated at all, playtesting the hero, seeing the hero in an unorganized environment. Like a lot of us thought that she would be difficult to use, and she is, but if you have something that like attaches to your character, essentially, because you wear the Suzu for a moment as you're moving, you can, you know, run forward and really be oppressive with it, with pressing W. Now, in the ranked context, I think often, a lot of times, the thing that becomes good is interacting with the tank. So if you have a character that can cleanse the Roadhog, then that is like the reason why it's good in that context. So it's like the same character with two personalities that interacts with it in different ways. And I feel like we can anticipate this by looking at things. And I also agree, obviously, with everybody, and I've said this for years as well, there is no way to balance it to make it everyone happy. So that's just not going to happen at all, because I'm warning you, everybody, you're worried about Sojourn with Mercy now. But I'm telling you, at some point, it's going to be Widowmaker. Like we knock Sojourn out the list, and a couple meta swaps away, there's going to be another hit scan that creeps their head out of the woodwork, just based on how the cover of this game works and how strong headshot and crits are in general. At the higher tiers, when you have a character that can do that, one of the hit scans is going to be dominant, I swear, unless we're just in like a full rush, something protects you enough. Ideally, we want to get to that map-based meta, but I personally feel like the majority of time, we're in either context, either OWL or ranked, we're finding these combos that are just a bit too easy of a solution or an outlier, or either because of the ceiling, or because of the approachability to it in ranked. So yeah, on the balance front, it's kind of hopeless. Does anyone want to talk about anything else they maybe can do?
It's not hopeless. They just need to decide what is the identity of the game? I don't know if we want to drag the conversation back there. And I'm not talking about it like, oh, what type of shooter is it? Because I think it should be pretty clear that it's meant to be an arena shooter with very well-defined classes called heroes that are very individual and unique and all that. That's fine. But because maybe Blizzard foolishly believe that they can balance around all ranks, but we've had 6 years to prove that they can. I don't think they've been able to prove that at all. Like in the last 6 years, I don't think they've been able to prove that they can balance around all ranks. So give up on that idea. Decide what the identity of the game is and balance around that, please. I think there is an answer, but they're not. They don't want to make that call.
What if they've made the answer already and the answer is lower, but they're still trying to throw bones?
Yes. Yeah. It's been very obvious. I'm like laughing because to me, it's been very obvious for 5 years or more that they exclusively balance around the general player base around like Diamond at most. And so they've done that for many years. That's why they were so like slow on nerfing so many things over the years. Like to me, it's almost a rehash argument.
Well, Jeff always said, like, he was like, well, the community can just figure it out. Like, they'll just figure out the counter. Like, that's almost verbatim something that came out of his mouth in terms of his philosophy. I don't know if that's still been retained now that Aaron's in charge, but like, I also don't know if I don't know if they want to get into that either about like, is it the right call for them to make to balance around low ranks to high rank?
Yes, undeniably better for the business, better for the game, better for everything. And as a company, they're going to do what's better for the business and for most players. The thing is,
I don't know that it is better for the business. That's a long debate.
It is to them, I think. I think they're the only reason they're going to do it, and I'm a little bit cynical when it comes to this stuff, is if they have data showing it. And if they have all the data showing like, oh yeah, we have these massive numbers of casual players who log in twice a week, and we make sure there's not noob stompers at their rank, and they log on, they have a great time, then yeah. But as for everything else you're saying, when I look at the history of the balance in the game, I think it's been pretty obvious they've always done that. And what they do, though, is what Flat said. They're trying to make concessions towards higher ranked players to try to reduce things from stomping us into the ground. But it is, and I think this is how most games are, to be honest, largely aimed at the mid-range player. And then they see outliers at the high end, they try to tone them down. I don't know anything about Overwatch League in the past few years. I don't know patches they've aimed targeting that in particular. I don't know anything about the competitive scene in the last 3 years or so. But outside of that, that's my thoughts on it.
Well, Flats is right. Like most of the patches that target Owl are also for like top ranked as well. It's like it's basically reflected in top 500, so they're both intertwined in that way.
To add a bit more complexity to this is what they showed in that matchmaking blog, where I don't know how much you guys, maybe I know Flats obviously does the reaction content to bronze gameplay, but trying to imagine so many new players being bronze 5, like what that means to the shifting of the player base, like what those players struggle with, what they understand about the game. A lot of these concepts are so alien to them, then something as simple as a Genji double jumping in front of them is going to be so much more oppressive than it is for the players that understand the counters or how to interact with that. Like there's so many things, we mentioned Hammond earlier, for example, that are so alien to any other game of what you're even supposed to do, right? Just the knowledge of what this character does, we take for granted, again, as being the Overwatch 1 crowd that was more invested. And I feel like the fervor around Overwatch 1 was much more, whereas they introduced characters, we started to learn the personalities of them, and before we even got to play it, it's like we knew who Tracer was on the poster behind me, for example. We kind of got that, whereas I feel like there's a lot of players that are just jumping in like, oh, it's free, and then just getting blasted with all this new information and these wacky mechanics that are unlike any other game. So I'll leave we have a few dissenting opinions on how they can balance it, but I want to transition the conversation a little bit more now towards they're adding more complexity, because that, as we've circled around this point, is the content the game needs to survive. At the very least, we need new things. And we already are a little skeptical on Season 2 having a different identity, basically because of the strength of Sojourn, I guess, where it's a different flavor with Mercy attached as opposed to the Lucio Carrico, but essentially the same thing with her dominating higher tier play. I want to talk a bit about Ramattra as a character, but as well the cadence of them rolling things out, because a lot of people were worried that Ramattra was going to be widely overpowered. And this is the thing that people say about new characters getting added to Overwatch. Oh, they're always overpowered. This is like a super balanced character, so much so that maybe he doesn't dominate the conversation of giving the season a new identity. And my question is to everybody, should they maybe push it a little harder in order to create that mix-up appeal? Like, would it be better to, this is how I say it anyway, rather than reorganize the matchups of the rest of the game, I'd rather they focus a bit more on that new element being something to worry about, like a threat or something, and then we re-understand the game in totality around it. That's the crazy thing about Overwatch, and at some point, we possibly might have to have the conversation about hero swapping being so complicated, but because the game is built around hero swapping, every time they add a new component, that's like another threat that you have to think about in the totality of every match. Whereas in a draft game, it's like you kind of have different roles, but at least you can wrap your head around what you're going to deal with in that game. Even with like 100 characters in a MOBA, like you can, as you're going through the draft phase, you think about, all right, this character can do this, blah, blah, blah. There won't be a surprise new mechanic that they just swap to, and then all of a sudden there's a new thing you're dealing with. Like it's discrete in that way. Okay, so I hope I laid the foundation for that. I'm trying to remember the speaking order at this point. Does anybody want to volunteer for responding to the seasonal identity problem or Ramattra as a hero?
I think I have an interesting one on that. So basically for the last part before I talk about the seasonal, like the feel, is basically you're suggesting like you release a gigabuffed character and then scale them down.
Well, better than being like meh, I'd say.
Right, that'll create some problems. The general casual players base would freak out about the whole free-to-play thing. They would freak out.
Marketing wise, it might not be a bad idea though, because like if you get everyone talking about how broken this character is, and then you have a second patch like in reserve ready to go, and then like you release it, it's like and then they like nerf it a week later, and then they're like like everyone becomes like a little bit more happy about it at that point. I don't know, like if I guess if that's like that's a strat you can go with, I'm sure, but I think that the idea of the seasonal model. I honestly don't think Overwatch, for at least a casual side, is in a big problem with that. I think that Ramattra was fun and new, definitely underwhelming, but the hotfix made him a lot better, and it made him a lot more fun. I actually think he might be a pub stomper in like the low ranks. Like he's just going to be impossible to deal with because, for anyone who didn't see the Emon clip like last week on Twitter, it got like 400,000, 500,000 views or something like that, where they just basically sat there looking at each other, blocking the entire time. It was awesome. So like in the lower ranks, like you're going to probably have a lot more of that type of stuff. In the higher ranks, I mean, I haven't played a lot of ranks recently, but I played against Ramattra today and I just bullied him the whole game on Orisa. Like he tried to walk at me like 6 times, like, nah, just javelin. And he pulls out his arms, just like spin spear, fortify, javelin again. Like, what are you going to do? Like, you can't do anything against me, But in the lower ranks, I think he might, that ult might be even almost too strong versus them. But long term, I think it depends. I think things like the battle pass being really good. I think the cosmetics being really good. I think that having like events, like if there's more Halloween type stuff, like stuff for people to do, like content for them, I think it's going to be more than fine. It'll get boring and repetitive for us, and especially the meta like didn't change for us. But I'm sure when Ramattra hit ranked, like there was a lot of people who probably queued up Ramattra. In a lot of the lower ranks, even in the high ranks, people played Ramattra, probably figured out that Hog and Orisa were a lot better really quickly. But I don't think that the seasonal model's in too much trouble yet. I'll give you the balance side, absolutely, but I actually think that content wise, I think Overwatch is set for like at least a few years. We haven't hit PvE yet, Like imagine a world where we get hero. And then the next season where there's a map, like what if we got some new PvE stuff with that? You know what I mean? Like what if they had more PvE stuff to release to us? So instead of a new character, we got some PvE content and a new map in the next, like, whoa, like we'd have content for weeks, like at that point, and a casual player for months. So I don't know. I think seasonally, I think we're okay. Meta wise, in like each meta in each season having a different type of meta, absolutely needs some help.
Seagull looked excited to jump in there. You got something to say?
I mean, I'm trying to. There's a lot of parts of this conversation that we're going through right now.
Yeah. Sorry.
Or maybe bit by bit. Yeah, this is totally my fault.
So bit by bit would be I think when we're talking about complexity, new characters being added, balance, stuff like that, and we're talking about specifically new players, I think what a lot of people don't realize about Overwatch and new players being Bronze 5 and stuff like that is just that there's so many things in Overwatch that are a knowledge check. You just have to know what it is or else you die. And so an example of that is Ramattra's ult. If you don't know what that is, you're just dead. If you don't know what a Cassidy is, it's like, what is that character? And suddenly you just like, oh, what is this? And then you just go boom. Right. There's so many things like that in the game in 20,000 different ways. And then you slowly figure that out because Overwatch has so many sort of, you either know it or you're dead moments like that. And so because of that, I don't think it's surprising that newer players are really bad because how could you not be? Like you have to learn so much. There's such a high barrier of knowledge you have to play the game. But as for all this other stuff, yeah, it's not. A lot of it is you have to learn it as you play. There's no other way to do it. You learn the situation and you're like, oh, that's a diva bomb. It could kill me from really far away. Like, oh, okay. What's the first time you guys remember seeing a diva bomb? You're like, oh, stuff like that. Yeah. Like, wow, I was really far.
Before you switch subjects, yeah, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, how many people do you think know that if you roll on Cassidy with a pulse bomb, you could survive?
No, not many. Not many. Yeah, there's a lot of stuff that is not very intuitive to new players, like the 50%. It might be the 30 or 50% DR that you're talking about.
High noon is 30. I think the roll is 50.
Yeah, something like that.
I forgot he retained that. I forgot about that. I knew that was in Overwatch 1, but I forgot he kept it.
But that's another knowledge check, right? You get pulse bomb in your cast and you can roll it, you're going to survive. If you don't, you're dead. And that's another example of, and most people, even high ranks, don't even know that. So, because they don't remember every specific patch note or they don't remember every specific nuance interaction or this or that. But as for the content and the seasonal model stuff, that's like a whole different discussion. And I will say that we don't know anything about PvE, so speculating on the quality of that is pointless because we don't know anything. And so it could be, what if it comes out and it's just complete trash? And then you're sitting here like, oh, it's going to be great. And I think, no, you don't. You actually don't know. You don't know anything. And we don't know any of the mechanics other beyond just the Halloween event. And the Halloween event's great, but we don't know.
I mean, the minimum requirement, the minimum expectations, at least like what we had in Overwatch 1. Like it wouldn't be below that because we've at least had that as a baseline. So I think that would be like a safe assumption, at least.
I'll return to the PvE thing. AVRL, if you have more on the first point that was made, you can go. And I also wanted to add as well.
Points? I was like, we've had like 5 different points brought up.
There's a lot.
The complexity of the game. So like maybe we can give Blizzard a little credit here because it was pretty controversial the first time user experience gating heroes off. But I think in hindsight, with that data that they're showing us, they're almost justifying it. I feel because I wouldn't have guessed average players are bronze 5. Like if you asked me this, I would probably guess gold maybe.
No. I think I would have said closer to silver, if not towards bronze. I mean, like Seagull said, it's a massive knowledge check, and that knowledge check will only increase as more content's added to the game. Because it's not just knowledge check in terms of heroes. You have to know map design as well. If you want to really succeed, you got to know where the health packs are. You got to know where to push, where the angles are, where you can be approached from and flanked from, all that kind of stuff in different maps as well. And then like the nuances of how all the different game modes play. And they're going to add another game mode at some point. So this is just more knowledge that is going to be checked for every single new player. And remember, the people that were really mad about the whole like gated heroes for new the gating of the heroes for new players, the people that were mad about that were people that already played the game. It wasn't going to affect anyway. It's a bunch of people that were like considering the theory of like how bad that could be if it was like really poorly done, but it wasn't going to affect them anyway because they already had all the heroes unlocked. They're not even new players. It's a bunch of people that are not new players that got mad about what the new player experience could have been, which doesn't even affect them. Anyway, what was the next topic after that?
Yeah, we have several up in the air. So either the seasonal model having identity, with Ramattra specifically as an example.
By the way, Season 3 is going to be a real check because there's not a new hero. It's going to be our first season in Overwatch 2 with no new hero. What does that mean? How are people going to respond to that, react to that? I wouldn't be surprised if... I don't think we're going to get PvE next season. Obviously, that'd be too soon. I think it's still reasonably far off. So... being that we don't have anything major coming in, we already got a new map with a new hero for this season. So you're not going to get a hero next season. You might get a map, but is that going to be enough to keep people's interest? That to me is a major check.
Yes, agreed completely. But also at the same time, we might anticipate those off seasons between hero releases to be the best balance, because I kind of agree that the balance was good at the end of Overwatch 1. And whenever the game has settled for a bit, then they've been able to get enough data to make more informed decisions. So, does anyone want to weigh in on
bronze.
Yes, what are the bronze 5 players struggling with today? Genji, okay, he gets dumpstered. What do we let's specifically talk about Ramattra being added to the game as a sort of like niche hero. I think, do we all agree with that statement? And is that good for the game? Should that be the aim? Because like I think by some people's definitions, Ramattra as released is the ideal, because he's balanced, right? Like he's not overpowered, he's like playable, and at certain ranks we might argue where he's the best. I see it differently to a lot of people. Most people seem to think that he giga stomps lower ranks. I think he's more of a higher rank pick, but regardless, it's like we're not entirely sure. It's not like, wow, he's the best character easily, obviously, for everyone, which is you might make some arguments that Kariko was pretty darn good, since she had so much flexibility at every rank as well. So anyone who wants to jump on that new subject
really quick,
now,
I'll just have a really fast point, because I know I just spoke previously as well about the whole Ramattra thing, because I just remember something else that was brought up about Ramattra. You actually said this, Frito. I don't think they should ever balance around like purposefully making new heroes OP for the sake of it being OP, to then, I think Flats might have chimed in about this as well, to like sort of, I don't know, generate, I don't even want to say hype, because I think they're going to generate hatred. Like you're going to you on one hand, you're going to generate hype, like, oh, you got to play this hero, but on the other hand, it's just going to piss people off, like wildly piss people off, especially if you're a free-to-play player that you have to wait till level 45 to unlock that. You're just like, this is this crazy broken hero in the game. It's bad for balance. I think it's bad for business, and it's just so fake as well. Like it's just like you're purposely trying to mess with the game in an unnatural way. Doesn't feel right to me.
I hear you. So would you give them a very glowing grade of Ramattra then as a character? You think that they did it right? Because I'm assuming we all agree he's not like oppressive,
I think
right?
post hotfix, he's much closer to being right. I think on release, he probably felt slightly underwhelming, but I think that's due to the case of him being so flexible. When you have a tank, which is a hero that is trying to do a lot, because he's got two forms. He's essentially two hero designs in one. You can't make him too good, because then like he's just gonna have too much to work with. So yeah, like it's a trade-off in power to flexibility. That's at least my position on it, is from what I see.
Okay, I'm going to twist the question slightly now as we toss it. As content creators, I feel we're pretty well attuned to the hype and conversation around the game, because we have to interact with the audience that plays it, watches the game. From my point of view, because he was mediocre to begin with, the intensity of that hype felt a little underwhelming to me from what I noticed. And maybe I'm wrong in thinking that. And my brain agrees with AVRL that I think they deserve praise for where they've released him at. But I think the community's appeal, like it's like I'm seeing so many comments of just like Ramattra's bad, and I've seen viral videos of like there's a great one. I'm trying to remember. I wish I knew who it was that made this, but it was in my algorithm that on my personal account that I watched. And Ramattra trailer versus reality. It's like in the trailer he tosses this snare and like Farah's coming down out of the sky, and then in reality it's like she's above it and flies above it in the skybox and you never hit her, right? And things like that. Like he look in the trailer, he looks like he's running over everybody. But in the game, he's actually like a high game sense, interaction-based character where you have to know how to play him pretty well, which from a balance standpoint and competitive integrity, I love, but it also makes me worried that the Bronze 5 players aren't going to have any fun with this character. And I also think it's a bit of a conflicting ideology, because they're seemingly okay to buff the new character Sojourn to be good for the average player, or leave her, let's say, and rework her a bit so that she's playable for most players, even if she breaks the higher tier meta. But it seems like that's not what they did with Ramattra. So I'm just a little confused on that. Flats or Seagull, do you want to chime in on the question there?
You want to go, Flats?
I can go really fast. I think you actually have, honestly, like unintentionally asked a different question. Is like, are they properly marketing heroes when they release? So we're actually 2 for 2 now. So Kiriko was marketed as the DPS support. The way she was played in the high level / pro meta was just a heal bot to build her ult and then go crazy with the ult, and uh, her damage is so hard to hit and like sustain with. It's like, yeah, she's really, really viable and she's super, super fun. But like definitely sent the wrong message when she went out. Because that was like not the proper way to play her. But on the other and then with Ramattra, it's the same thing. It's like, you're building up to run in and just start stomping people almost like you're playing like a Rhine type of deal, but it's like you're not even the strongest tank up close. There's like actually a few others that I would say are probably better than Ramattra up close. But obviously has that middle ground area. But I wouldn't say that they're probably having no fun with them. I think they're probably having a blast popping their ult and then just standing near everybody and they all die. But I also am definitely more in I think he was underwhelming and I think that caused him to be underhyped. And, a lot of people thought he was going to be broken. And I almost wonder, because he doesn't hit comp for 2 weeks, if people were disappointed that he was not broken. Because I was actually a little disappointed he wasn't broken. I thought I was going to have a lot of fun for 2 weeks and just run through quick play and sit in 20-minute queues and play balloons and have a good time. But I picked Ramattra and I got bullied by Reinhardt. And I was like, Reinhardt doesn't bully anybody. What's going on here? So, that's, I guess, where I'm at.
Historically, most new characters in Overwatch are horribly overpowered. I don't think I ever want to hear the words, guys, I think we need to have new characters be a little stronger in the same game that released Launch Brigida. Okay, like, I think you guys are kind of crazy. I'm just being honest. And also, what AVRL was talking about earlier with, like, the balance being, sometimes I wonder if they're making stuff too overpowered. I don't think they do so intentionally.
No.
It's really, really difficult for a dev to figure out where that line is at their core level of, like, is this overpowered or not? Because you're just playing internally with, like, probably 100 people across the company or so. I don't know what their internal play tests look like, right? But I'm just saying. And then you release it into the wild, basically into the general population. And so most things are usually a little bit overpowered because, and I'm going to be honest here, the devs aren't as good as most of the high-end players because they're actually busy developing the game and we're busy no-lifing it for the most part. And so when you put it in the hands of a really good player and they happen to, like, start going hard with it and popping off and stuff, like, yeah. I guess where I'm at with regards to this conversation is just, I assume a little bit more of just the natural, they don't know actually where things are going to perfectly land because you can never know until you release it. And so it's usually easier for devs, and this is true almost in every game I've seen, like Valorant, League. I've seen like a lot of games. New stuff always comes out and it's always a little bit overpowered. And it's usually because it's not because and a lot of people will go the intentional side of things, like, I wonder if they're intentionally doing this to, like, amp up the sales and do this stuff. It's no, because those people aren't even in charge of that stuff. They are just, it's easier to find the place of something if it's slightly overtuned and then tone it down than if something is underpowered and, like, try and buff it in a lot of cases for devs. And so when it comes to Ramattra, I mean, I don't know. I feel like you guys are saying that maybe he wasn't as exciting, and I felt like he was awesome to play, though. You ran around, you had a great time. His voice lines are awesome. The feeling of playing Ramattra is awesome. And as for whether or not he's good or bad, I mean, he wasn't that great on launch. So they just buffed him and gave him move speed, which is probably one of the biggest buffs they've given. So I'm not too worried about Ramattra. I think he'll have a place and he'll be fine. And I would rather them come at characters like that for my general sanity than go through stuff like Sojourn and stuff like that, where things are released totally insane and you're just like, oh god, why? And then there's also the other part of this too, which is Ramattra inherently is a character who doesn't have mobility, and so because of that, he is inherently a character that's always going to be a little bit niche, right? You're not going to see Ramattra probably played on stuff like Second Point Dorado or something, right, with tons of verticality, tons of long sight lines, stuff like that, because unless you're like hard deathballing somewhere, it's probably really hard to make that character work. And so I think it's fine that they add characters without that level of mobility and stuff.
There's a lot of mobility creep in the game, though, especially for tanks. And I think that adds to his, like, feeling of underwhelmingness because, like, most tanks have mobility in the game. And when you release a tank that doesn't, it's just like, well, especially when he's got like a very melee-ish close range form. I felt like most people thought that Nemesis particularly was the underwhelming part of his kit. But I'm also on board with you. Like, yeah, I don't think the devs purposely, and I think this is true for almost all games, they don't purposely try and make overpowered stuff in the new content. It's just almost, so for some reason, it's just accidentally that way all the time. They just underestimate, I think, the player base sometimes or all the time. And I wouldn't be surprised if they even like, undertuned Ramattra on purpose because they were concerned that like, okay, we don't want a repeat of Junker Queen, or we don't want to, we hear the criticism of people being like, okay, well, if, it doesn't feel right if it's like a quote unquote paywalled character that's super broken. So I wouldn't be surprised if they even like, again, undertune it for that reason and then realize it's, maybe he needs a bit of help. But I prefer that direction than the other way around for sure.
Yeah, I love you bring up Queen because I wanted to talk about Junker Queen because I think that was one of their major mistakes so far that looks like a glaring error to me, or one of the cases where I feel like they did just balance for Owl, and not just that, they balanced for a patch that almost nobody played when they knew Kiriko was being added in the next cycle anyway. So that one is really confusing for me. So part of me agrees with everybody in either case. So I think Ramattra being released as is was a success. I'm just a little bit worried about the public reception of, the tank roll is a star roll in Overwatch 2. It gets, that's where all the queue times are. It feels like a lot of people want to play, and then you get in there and the perception versus reality is a little different. So I don't know if we just need to educate the player base and get more time playing the game in like a really quality interaction, because I think that's what Ramattra adds to the game. I want to give my review then of like the implications of this. We've said a lot of things that I think like we don't take time to appreciate from the game, where like Flat said, wow, it looks like Rhine is viable against him. And it's like, hold on a second, Rhine, like this is so what they did then with that content release was add a new element that has like some strong matchups, but then made characters that were dead in the water against most other things good. And I felt the same. Like, I'm a bit of a Wrecking Ball specialist personally, so playing Rhine or Wrecking Ball, these engaged characters that are more controlling the front line or running in deep, those are the characters I like to play most as tank, and they're great against Ramattra. I'll tell you what, though, the way we know if he'll ever be played on Dorado streets, for example, is if they turn the snare into the power level of Orisa Halt, maybe, where you're like, when we have seen Orisa get played in maps where she shouldn't have been on attack in Overwatch 1 was when the power of being able to go grab things out of position to negate the fact that you can't move or be too sustainable in our own right. So I think because we're not dealing with those problems, and instead Ramattra is like this multifaceted character that has bits and pieces of these ideas and isn't breaking the game, that's a huge win for me. But I don't know if it succeeded in creating that seasonal identity that they're going for us anyway. So I think I'll let the point stand that maybe for the casual player experiencing it, that's enough, the new content and all that. So I'll switch topics if we want, unless anyone has something to say about everything that was just said. Any final thoughts on Ramattra, the seasonal model, anything like that? Nope.
I'm good.
Okay, moving on. Expanding now on the seasonal model, we know what we're getting. We're getting new maps, new characters. I'm anticipating the next season to be better balanced, let's say, hopefully when the devs come back. I want to know, based on what we can know so far, which is very limited, about the PvE, what are our expectations in terms of what we want to see? And what do we expect them to need to do? Like, what bar do they need to hit? Because I feel I can elaborate on this at length about PvP, because I understand it really well. I'm like, well, release new things, hotfix quickly, like make informed decisions. I want them to be a bit more proactive. Okay, boom, 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 boom. That's what I want from PvP. Can anyone maybe jump in? And I'm hoping maybe the PvE guy has some opinions on this. I know you want to be in wait and see mode, but especially like, I assume some of you have been watching the talks about Diablo 4, for example. So that's like a new PvE type game that they're releasing that's kind of setting a benchmark, I feel, and knowing how Blizzard works internally somewhat, I bet they're going to want to have a bit of a unified form in terms of expectations of what their new quality standard is for these releases. And we can't like one-to-one compare, because one's going to be a live service with a big launch, and ours is going to be a seasonal model rollout over time. What do we think they need to do? Like, what experience should we expect for it to succeed? Now, they might underdeliver, but what bar do we want to set for that? Seagull, anything on that? All right, you can go first.
I'll just say it's going to be I'll just say it's going to be replayable minimum.
Okay.
Like super replayable. Like it can't be like one and done. I play the campaign, I'm finished, I don't touch this again. It's got to be very replayable. That's all I'll say for now.
All right.
I mean, doesn't it just kind of? It depends on so many factors that we don't know. Because when I think about the PvE side of the things, I think about the fact that they essentially had to do a 180 and turn around and work on PvP again just to get something out the door. And so I kind of wonder if they just gave up on it still. No matter what they say, I don't think their ambition and the scale of what they originally had planned is going to be the same. I don't. What I expect is what we got in the Halloween event, plus maybe some more replayable elements behind the scenes. But the initial plans and the initial ambition behind that game, I don't think that's ever coming back. Because I think the moment that they turn around the bus and they decide to go free to play PvP, we need to get something out the door. We're wasting too much money on this. You don't, I think, get to fulfill the original vision anymore. I think you are compromising at a certain point. And I just don't see it. I think it'll be the original vision would have been, I mean, what it sounded like was a full PvE side of the game, and that they were willing to abandon PvP Overwatch for the last 4 years to build it. And that was basically
they
wanted
built
people,
something because they've been working on it for 4 years. They built something.
That stuff takes longer than 4 years, but that side of things would have been like full end game, full everything. You're leveling every character as it gets launched, full end game, gearing systems, talent systems, creating builds, and probably raids, right? And like you're going all out, and that is, I don't see that ever coming back. And so I think it'll probably be a toned down version of that. They're going to take the missions, going to take everything. And you're going to have what happened during the Halloween event. They're going to have scores. They're going to have stuff like that. And they'll probably give it to you on a seasonal basis and instead do the seasonal basis stuff. And you'll just get a compromised version where you're going to play it and you'll be like, this mission was really nice. You're going to play a cool campaign. And then maybe it'll have some elements of that, but I don't think it's ever going. I mean, it might. It
won't come out all at the same time. I think it's achievable. It'll just have to be a slower rollout. I think I'm trying to remember where I saw this, but there was a commitment they wanted to bring that out. But it's more like a rollout form. It wasn't just like, here you go, here's a boom, here's your PvE dropped, everything we've worked on the X amount of years that we've been worked on just all at the same time. But like, to me, most of the vision of what the PvE was based on what they even revealed originally at BlizzCon, I think is fully achievable. A full campaign, level up characters in their replayable mode. I'm just trying to remember what it's called. It's like the adventure mode from Diablo 3, right? Do all of that with the talents and all that. I think that's like, yeah, it's a reasonable undertaking, but what the hell else have they been working on? Because they only worked on the PvP in the last year, and I don't think the free-to-play changes that much. Like, you can still roll out all your PvE plans through a free-to-play game. Like, what was the alternative? They were going to box Overwatch 2 and sell the PvE as another box copy. For me personally, I think the game was always going to be free-to-play. Like, that was always part of the plan. They were always wanting to do that. And, you know, that's even from stuff I heard behind the scenes, so I'll probably stop there so I don't accidentally leak anything. But like, yeah, to me, PvE with free-to-play was always part of the plan. Like, that's by design. That wasn't an accident.
Let me try to see if I'm understanding Seagull's point. Who's trying to get in there?
Go for it.
I'll do this real quick. So to translate what you said, it seems like what you're saying is if they thought that they could have steamed ahead for the big release, they would have done that. Like if it was approachable, let's say, for a year or two more, and they thought it was going to be perfect and release with Blizzard polish and be all the old Blizzard stuff we come to expect from it, they would have continued on that a bit more. Whereas because they went back to 0 and Jeff left, and then we focused on PvP, that's indicating to you, it seems, that the end game and all the deep complexity we will expect from a co-op campaign is likely to be so far off that you think we're essentially never getting it, and we're going to get it so piecemeal over time that it's going to be underwhelming. Am I picking up all your points there, Seagull?
You're getting close, but I'm actually more pessimistic. I think actually you're probably just going to get some nice PvE campaign missions that are going to be in like a $20 battle pass instead of a $10 battle pass.
Okay.
And I think you're probably going to pay for it season by season, yeah. And then eventually you will see elements of that PvE stuff, like it'll pop up, but I don't think you're ever going to get the full experience the same way that they wanted it to be. I think you will get pretty far though. It won't be bad by any means, but there's a difference in what I believe their initial ambition was versus what we'll probably end up getting. And I think what we're going to get is a souped up version of the Halloween event. And what I played, I really liked a lot. I really, really did enjoy it. And add some levels, add some builds, add some talents on top of that type of gameplay and a general scoring system, we call it good. And I think that's probably what it's just going to be.
Right, because in order to have all that end game, well, this is something that happens in every RPG game, really, where if you try to make a new one, whether it's an MMO or RPG or anything, you're going against the expectations of the Path of Exiles of the world, for example, compared to Diablo 4, where you just don't have enough time in the new engine to have all of those extra features that give the endlessly replayable feel that was the original vision of the game. So I think no matter what, because it's piecemeal, we can expect what you're saying to some degree, that it can't be any other way. Like, how could we even expect it to have endlessly replayable at launch or even in the first year or so? But we've all spoke quite a bit on this subject. I want to turn it to Flats for any comments on the entire PvE discussion.
So I think I have a very interesting perspective, maybe. I think this is actually one of the few places I fall into probably the casual gamers like ideology. So I love PvE / like campaign games. I actually wish I could play them more often. It's kind of just something I really enjoy kicking back and doing. I think realistically, PvE, if it's replayable, would be the best thing possible. You could, for my own content, whatever. Like, let's say it ends up being like kind of like the Halloween event plus, and it's like you have like the scoreboard, and you have like rank 1 runs, and people are doing all like this fun stuff around it. There could be so much stuff, and I hope that that's the case. But if it was actually one-off playable missions, I genuinely enjoy. I would enjoy playing it and then go and moving on. I enjoy stories. I always used to play story games all the time off stream. I haven't been doing it really in the last like year or two. I try to do a few on stream, but like games like Red Dead, they were just so long and so slow. It was really hard to stream them just because I'm someone that wants to do everything. I want to like explore every location. I want to check every corner. Is there anything hidden in here? Like secret chests, side missions, whatever it is. And that's really slow, dragging on stream content. So I haven't been able to do it recently. And also sometimes there's some backseating and stuff like that, but not the point. Point is though, if it was really enjoyable, like a one-time experience, I would still be happy with it. I would enjoy it. I would have a good time. Would it be worth all the wait that we put up with for the years? Absolutely not. But I would still have a good time with it. So I honestly just look forward to PvE no matter what it is. I hope it's something more where it's replayable and we can really do some stuff with it and have a good time. But if it's not, I actually don't think I would be that upset.
AVRL, you seem to be pretty optimistic about Blizzard's capability of eventually getting the PvE to where it needs to be. So would you say it's because you're like, do you agree with the point we made earlier that the scale and scope of it is going to be minimal? Like, first of all, step one, and then two, like, is that up your alley? Do you think the general player base will like that? Or does it need to be bigger and grander to have the impact the game needs it to have?
I mean, I just think if they can get most of the way to what they revealed at BlizzCon in 2019 and what they basically, even on the BlizzCon lines of what they've been working on and what their direction for it, which is the minimum PvE experience, in my opinion, has got to be whatever the full story campaign is, into the replayable missions with the leveling up and the talents. If they can just get that out of the way and just have that, like, it doesn't even have to be like a ton. It doesn't. Here's the thing: because it's scalable, your campaign doesn't even have to be long. Now, that would be pretty disappointing if we waited all these years and the campaign wasn't even super long. But like, my overall point is they can add to that over time because it's a developing story on a free-to-play model game, which is always evolving. And if you're assuming that, for a free-to-play model game, it's meant to be super, it's meant to have a lot of longevity. It's meant to be going for a long ass time, if not forever, like a League of Legends type game, which is 10 plus years. Then you have a lot of room, a lot of time to add in more missions, expand that campaign over and over and over, and for the replayable missions as well, for the leveling up. Yeah, I mean, like, you can always add more missions to that as well, more variety there as well. So for me, if the base skeleton of the PvE exists on day one of whatever the PvE is, and if there's room to scale that forward to add to it in future, then that's all we really need. So to me, they would achieve the goal already if they just like got to that level. So I don't know if that's like optimistic, but I think that's very achievable. I just think that's like, especially with the amount of time they've already worked on it, that's like that should be achievable. Why should that not be achievable, right?
Interesting. I want to make some analogies here, maybe to broaden
Wait,
our.
can I hop in real fast?
Go ahead.
I was just going to say that I think we're actually on the same page when we're talking about that. I just think that and what you're describing is different from the original thing they set out to do. And the original thing they set out to do was a lot more ambitious than just that. But now they're just packing it up in that seasonal model, and they are just going to, and it will be.
I think I don't understand what the original model is, because that maybe we have a different understanding of what the like original plan was. Because I think from your perspective, it's a lot bigger, and maybe I've missed something.
It kind of just felt like this wanted to make a full PvE game, like just straight out. Like this wasn't going to be a seasonal thing. Like no, they were just making Overwatch Destiny, is what it kind of felt like. That was my impression of it.
I mean, I think they can still get there. It'll just take time. Like Destiny wasn't built like, look at where Destiny 2 was compared to where Destiny is now. It's like, you are correct. It takes a long ass time to build PvE content, and even Destiny couldn't arrive at where Destiny was until they had several more years post-launch development. And that's what PvE ends up being. So whatever our PvE looks like, it's going to still need several years of post-launch development.
I mean, I think it'll be, to be like very clear here. Like actually, the thing I'm still in, like I'm pessimistic about monetization, some other like big topics, right? But to be very like as clear as possible, I'm actually most excited for PvE than anything else in Overwatch, because even in its reduced scale and reduced state, dude, I had so much fun no-lifing a stupid point system on a scoreboard in Halloween. I spent like 12 hours doing that to get rank 1 for like a night. That was really cool. And so to have, yeah, for like an hour before someone beat us. Yeah, exactly. But it was cool, right? And so realistically, I'm just arguing a very specific nuanced point of like, I think when they originally set out to do this 4 years ago, it was much bigger, and now they're toning it down, and I am disappointed in that, and that's why I did that whole video about it, like, at launch and stuff like that. But now I'm pretty confident what it's going to be and what the scale of that's going to look like. It's what you said. I think it's just going to be souped up Halloween stuff plus the campaign missions, and then as seasons go on and as we progress past what they've already built with the campaign will, and the story will continue. So that way in season 10 they're probably still, or season 15, season 20, whatever number, I don't know what number we're talking about, they're probably still releasing stories to keep people interested in the lore and everything else, and that way it fits in the live service model. And so yeah, anyway, that was it. Sorry, go ahead, Frito, I cut you off.
No, great. That's all great. You gave me a lot to work with there. So Netflix releases shows all at once, okay? And you binge them, and you get through the whole thing. And it's a bit of a problem for content in some ways, because the old school broadcasting model, you might get feedback on a character that's performing poorly in your audience testing and rewrite them and change it. But if you do the binge model of it all comes out at once, then you're not really able to steer it in time, and it's kind of got to be perfect on release, which is, I think, as well, part of the reason why they needed to delay it. But the truth is, I don't know if any of us know what a game like this looks like being released this way, because normally there's a bigger upfront and they build on top of it, or in Blizzard's case, they released Diablo 3 and there's like rumors that there was a second expansion canceled. Not sure if how true that is or not, but they sort of like maybe add an expansion. Whereas this new model almost feels like, to me, like each drop might be like a percentage of a expansion, right? Each segment of the way. And I almost wonder if this is better than the Elden Ring drop one game and you play it for your whole life type model, because alongside it is also this PvP experience where as we drop story missions for Lucio or whoever, then there's a new player base that we're not even tapping into yet, right? These are the bronze. What's the lowest rank? Is it? I forget. Is bronze 5 the lowest rank? It is actually the. Oh my god! So they put. I just realized the severity of that MMN thing, of how bad that actually was. They're literally the lowest rank. I wish I said that earlier, but okay. So we're going to get a lot more bronze 6s. The PvE players that are going to be introduced to understanding who these characters are. I was saying this earlier that Overwatch 1 was just like in a different place with the approachability and the marketing and the eyeballs that were on it and how many gamers were interested in a brand new Blizzard IP. Now the shooter landscape's entirely different, and I think this will give an opportunity for another leap of players to get introduced to the general game. And at least as far as like the PvP is concerned, I think that will help continuously add like another flock of those bronze 5s with each subsequent expansion as we continue down the line. So the more we talk about this, the more optimistic I am, because like I said earlier, they have the opportunity to change a lot of things, whether it's the content itself, how much it is. Now, unfortunately, I think what sometimes happens with this is they might put a lot of energy to make a good first impression and then fall off later. Whereas I have followed Destiny 2, for example, or at least the conversation around it. Some expansions are hits, some are misses, and it kind of goes up and down. But at the very least, you have that feedback for them to go back and rethink about it. And a key term I want to switch gears to now, we can still talk about this, but eventually I want to get to this, the monetization of it to be a pipeline so that this can go possibly a long time. And we might eventually, in 10 years, get to that final end game vision that was the original vision of the game.
I still think like the model is going to be close to Destiny in terms of, it's like an inverse Destiny, where Destiny is a PvE game that happens to have the PvP. This is like a PvP game that's going to have the PvE coming through. But I think even down to business model, it's like you're probably going to end up paying for whatever next PvE content drop is per season or whatever. Like I wouldn't be surprised if that's going to be the case, because the amount of effort it takes, the amount of dev time it takes to create PvE content, just way, way, way bigger than anything they do for PvP.
I'd like to jump in here and just talk about, I think, something that's really important, which is all PvE games that you guys are discussing drop a lot of things at once. They don't start off by drip feeding. And so everything you talk about with where you're saying like, oh, it's actually kind of nice that they are doing like this episode type of model, right? Where they're releasing things season by season because they get feedback and do this and that and change things, whatever. I don't believe that's true at all. In my view, if you don't actually get a full story to keep me committed and interested in something, at least in one big bundle, like you're comparing to like more standard box products, I'm just not committed. I just don't care as much. And also, I feel like stories that are set in that way in a seasonal model are usually not as good. And that's why games like Destiny, games like Final Fantasy 14, some of the best games in the world at doing this type of model, they have expansions and seasonal content. But most of the story is carried via expansions, where you play through a longer campaign, and then you get through a huge story bit, and then the seasonal stuff goes bit by bit after that. But that just leads into another giant expansion where you again play through a nice big story. And so I have no idea how they're going to pull that off in Overwatch. That I genuinely don't know.
Just content drops. They just sell you an expansion in the PV in the free to play. Like I don't see it. I don't see how it would be any different to where Destiny 2 is now, which is a free to play game where they drop expansions that you pay for.
Flats, anything on this?
So I kind of want to loop back to the question that was asked, is which one's better? The big drop of everything at once or drip feed?
You can do both, by the way. You can do both. The first drop should be the biggest one, and then you can drip feed.
You can, true, but is that going to happen? I don't know. I mean, like, I guess that we can have that as a third option.
It needs to happen. I think it's necessary.
Well, I was gonna pose the question then: if it is the drip feed, or if it's not the drip feed. What if there's a world where it is a free to play, where it's not a paid content? How would they even monetize that? How do they make the most amount of money out of this and have the most amount of people playing at all times? Because the drip feed model probably makes them the most amount of money over time, because they have people keep coming back and they keep buying the battle pass and they keep coming logging back in. They see the skins, and they keep doing whatever. It's like, games like Elden Ring, right? Like Elden Ring was a masterpiece. I didn't get to play it. A lot of people played it. So I know you played it. I watched you play it for quite a bit. It was like, people loved the game, but like, what's it at now? Like, is it still making the same amount probably that it was before? Probably not even close. And I think Overwatch is going to try to make as much money as it physically can. So I think it's somewhere. I think you're right. It could be somewhere in the middle where there's like a big drop and then like drip feed. But I almost wonder though, if that is the route it goes, is it going to be like small seasonal events, almost like Halloween again? Because I don't think. I honestly I don't know. I don't know what their dev team size looks like. I can't help but sit and think about how long it's taken, like from that time in Overwatch 1. The first look we got was what, 2019. It was like there was already like a whole level built and ready to go for scene. Like it was probably in production for a year or two before that, and then like we're already here in 2022, 2023. It's like, are we going to really get really really complex, nice, awesome additional things beyond that big drop? And if the answer is no, are they then going to go, let's drip feed it because we have this really, really big, awesome like campaign? If we drip feed it out over time, then we can start working on more advanced and better drops in the future. Kind of like, everyone even expected an Overwatch. When Overwatch dropped, Overwatch 2 dropped, everyone thought there was going to be like 6, 7, 8 new characters. We only got 3. Like I think it's fair to say that they're probably working on more as the time went on. And they're like, okay, if we drip feed this out over time, the game will always stay alive and it will always keep making money. And that's better than dropping it all at once as a business. But it's bad for us as gamers and players because it's not as enjoyable for us. Because I personally would rather have the big drop. But whatever's going to make them the most money. Though.
That doesn't work. Like you're gonna. This is why the drip feed is necessary to some degree, and that's even the case with stuff like, you could argue Destiny 2 is like a drip feed, even though like each drop is fairly substantial. But the goal is it's a free to play model where they are consistently adding content that you will pay for, and that should be no different than. I don't see why Overwatch 2 would be any different in the PvE. The reason why I say it's like the first drop is going to be the biggest is because that's the one that's going to have the base campaign. Because the way I see this playing out is the PvE launch will be reasonably substantial. It's not going to be the vision that Seagull was painting. It's not going to be like, here's everything all in one go. Here's like a reasonable amount. You get it. You get I don't even know what you would quantify a full-length campaign to be, but you get a campaign, and then the story ends, ? Not really ends, because they have to continue the story, and then with subsequent seasons they will add to the campaign with more missions, and that is probably going to be some of the paid content you're paying for. I actually wouldn't be surprised if the replayable missions are free, because I don't have anything to substantiate that. That's just like my personal speculation in terms of what you can and can't, what you should and shouldn't monetize, and what's a good strategy. Is like, you could have a very solid free to play PvE experience that is the hero missions, while still having like a real paid structure behind the campaign. Like that can work.
I mean, what it kind of sounds like is none of us actually know the monetization, and so I think me and Ever are on the same page that we both think the best way, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, the best way for them to do PvE would be, hey, I want to be able to play more than like one mission at a time so I can get invested in the story and stuff. And then you're going to drop and go seasonal from there. I want to be able to play more than like one mission on launch, though. I don't want
Correct.
From my POV, and I'm pessimistic, is I see this type of thing, it being, maybe not like that. And it's such a big question mark because we don't know how it's monetized.
If it's one mission on launch, it's a disaster. That's a complete failure.
Yeah, I know. But that's the type of thing where I'm sitting there and in my head, I'm going, all right, $20 skins, maybe you pay $15 for this battle pass at a 10, and they're going to give you one PvE campaign this week. And maybe, you opt in with your $5 more battle pass to get weekly missions. I don't know. Like there's so many different ways they can go, and they haven't talked about it. So I'm completely clueless, but I do think it's important. And this is the bigger topic at hand that I was trying to get to was, when it comes to seasonal games, telling stories in a PvE game in a compelling way, this is something I have like the tens of thousands of hours in MMOs and a variety of games. I played Destiny for like 1,000+ hours. They all center around big pieces, which are expansions. 99% of the time, they have like big quest lines, big expansions, big anything. And then in betweens are small seasonal drip feeds into a next big moment or a big expansion. And so that's what my big question mark is, because it's, well, how is PvE Overwatch going to work? And if you're going to do this type of seasonal PvE content, give me missions, give me stuff like that. When I think of every live service PvE game, I think of Warframe, Destiny, WoW, Final Fantasy, even Guild Wars. They all do this type of thing where they have big pieces, big expansions that come out that a lot of time you pay for, not all the time. And then those are the big moments. And then there's drip feed where they have seasonal quest lines and repeat. And it's not always, I don't know what they're going to do with Overwatch. That's my big question mark.
They just haven't revealed that much information. They've been very, like, I don't blame them. You know, it's all behind closed doors. So the reason why is just you have to hard speculate is because there's just so much unknown.
I want to broaden and have this be our last topic as well about monetization just in general, but also for this content stream. So Seagull brought up a lot of, let's say, pain points, I think, for the community. One of my favorites is that the Pachimari attachment costs more in-game than out of it. There's hilarious things like that. But to some degree, playing other games that are free-to-play shooters, I had an expectation. I mean, I was huge into CSGO and Valorant when that came out as well. And the culture of those PC games is that skins are kind of ridiculous in terms of cost. And so much, like hundreds of dollars maybe. And Overwatch doesn't have anything like that, but it does have, let's say, questionable bundle prices and a lot of unfair monetization, it seems. I don't know if I think the Battle Pass is one of those. I do know what I think, actually, if I ask myself. I think the Battle Pass is very reasonable as it is as a product, but a lot of the other things are over the top. Now, what that says to me is that Blizzard wants a certain scale to your investment as a player that feels like you get the core experience, let's say, for a reasonable rate, and then extra stuff is going to be starting to get to unreasonable prices in order to tap into that whale economy that we know free-to-play games often thrive on. Now, it would be my anticipation that these PvE drops are within that reasonable price range of $10 to $20. I'm hoping something like that, almost even separate to the Battle Pass. I don't know if it's gonna. I would doubt it's coupled into that, because I think that's specifically for PvP. But whatever, nobody really knows this. But that's sort of where I'm judging it. And let's say a few missions for that price. I looked to their other game, Hearthstone, which does something kind of similar, where they released standalone little missions and stuff. And kind of going back to a point Flats made earlier about how he is excited for that. Me, as a casual Hearthstone player that taps in every once in a while when I have time, those missions go a long way for me, where I feel like I pay, I don't know, $10 or whatever it is in order to get a discrete experience, and I have a good time, and I don't have to necessarily grind the game and understand the meta and all these other complexities that a actual competitive environment has. And as I said earlier in the podcast as well, that's just like a new Overwatch 2 problem that is just getting worse over time as the game gets more complicated, the barrier of entry. So for me, as long as that price point is within that range, I see it as being a huge success. But does anyone want to chime in on what they think the game, the PvE needs to be priced at, or the monetization in general? If anyone wants to tee off on that, go ahead. Flats hasn't spoken in a while. Do you have opinions on this?
I'm in such a weird spot with this, because I think that if they do go the big drop, right? They go the big drop, then obviously it's paid expansion, whatever it might be. But if it's much more drip fed, it's like they're trying to maximize their profits off of things. What if even if we're in a world where it is part of the PvE is part of the free to play experience? What if they went down that route? What would that end up even looking like?
I said it. It's the replayable part can be the free part.
No, but I'm talking about the monetization. How do you monetize free to play PvE? What do you make it past what we currently have in Overwatch? Skins, collections, whatever it is. You gotta like, what is it?
You
like
can do
PvE
some really
powers?
heinous stuff if you wanted, but
Yeah,
I hope Blizzard
see,
don't. I hope Blizzard
that's-
don't go that.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking is if they're trying to make this long term and they're trying to make as much money off of it as possible, you know, that could be a possible route we go down. But I can't really. I don't even know what. I don't even want to think what it could possibly end up being. But the monetization of it is going to be really just like down to what they decide to do with how they deliver content. Anyways, we don't even know what it ends up looking like. If it's like Halloween, like they're probably going to go more the free to play route at that point and start trying to like have some other version or some other part be monetized, I would think. But if it ends up being some massive drop with like this really in-depth campaign, you learn so much about character stories and all this other stuff, then I could see that not having that end of the monetization and more being paid like within the battle pass or have being sold separately as its own separate piece, you know, like some $40 or $60 expansion, just as like a normal campaign kind of would be. But it's really hard to say depending on which route they go. You know, there could, I mean, like you know, a lot of people will say like the Overwatch monetization is really bad. And it is in a lot of ways really, really bad. And, you know, look at games like Apex where, you know, heirlooms are like, you can go pay up to like $500 for an heirloom. And it's like, well, at least we're not them. But it's like, yeah, but like, we're going to go down this route soon with PvE. And it's like, I wonder, like, you know, I wonder if we're going to go down an evil route here with like how PvE gets monetized. And I think that's probably the one big fear I would have. But otherwise, it's hard to speculate. We really don't know anything.
And what's
like,
your preference? What do you want it to be?
I wanted
If
to
you
do
could
one.
choose.
I would. So this is if I got to choose, I would be with you. I want the big drop paid. So like, you know, you pay like $30, $40 for a big drop, and then if there's seasonal like drops, that could be included either free to, in which I think you're right. I think the free to play model, like let's say it's like the Halloween type stuff. Like if there's like smaller events, that's included in the free to play experience, which makes you want to buy the big one from before. But then even if this is possible down the Destiny route, then there's the massive expansions later, because without the big massive like changes, it doesn't get people interested. Like, I mean, Overwatch 2 in itself in a lot of ways kind of proved that with a lot of people, where everyone was calling the first beta was like Overwatch 1.1. You know, it's like the changes weren't big enough. It's like to us like 5v5, oh my god, that's such a big change. Yeah, there's going to be a bunch of heroes later, but like to the average player, that's just Overwatch with a new coat of paint. Like if the PvE doesn't make some massive jump where a bunch of new mechanics are added, a bunch of new characters or a bunch of new bosses or whatever it is, it's not going to work. So I would say that my preferred method would be some big box, like here's 20 missions. I'll pay $30, $40, whatever it is. Then if you want to release small ones with like the seasonals in the free to play model, good to go, get people interested. And I'm sure they'll try to find a way to monetize that with more skins or something else, which I don't even want to think about. And then have some big expansions later. That is probably the best version. But I'm sure we're going to get whatever one that they've run the data on that makes the most amount of money. So we'll see.
Seagull's giggling.
I am giggling because my chat is trolling me. There's too much. I would say, wow, I am so pessimistic compared to you guys. So how I believe it's probably, and I think, okay, there's a couple ways I'm pessimistic and a couple ways I think I'm optimistic. We're just like normal. The first bit is that I think Overwatch does not fall under the same monetization style as a lot of other Blizzard games. It's very cookie cutter. And so if they're going to do a cookie cutter PvE, they're going to do a cookie cutter, or sorry, if they've already done cookie cutter PvP monetization, right? They're like, we have a rotating cash shop, we have seasonal battle passes, we sell skins. It's very basic. It's basically what everyone else in the industry does, right? They will do that to PV as well. And so I can imagine them, if in a perfect world, I would probably see it done something along the lines of, they will have, what Avril was saying, they will have a free-to-play bit of it, where maybe only certain portions early on in the campaign would be free, and then you would have a level cap where you would only level up to a certain level, just same as you do in every other PvE game, and then maybe a few repeatable missions that would be free-to-play. But then after that, I would assume you'd have to buy in, or alternatively, I mean, there's so many different ways they could do it, but they could actually go full PvE free to play if they wanted, which there's only a couple different ways they could. There's really two cookie cutter directions they could go. Do they want there should be a baseline form of content that's always free, but then the new expansion you have to pay for certain things, or maybe you buy the battle pass and opt in. That's all. There's so many different ways they can go, but I do think they will not do anything special. I think they will probably pick a pretty cookie cutter copy paste of what other people are already doing, because sorry, go ahead.
What about Game Pass?
I've thought about that before. They could go down that road, but who knows? But when it comes down to monetization on a general level, though, I mean, speculating about PvE battle or monetization is a little bit boring because it's so much we don't know, right? It's sort of, we're just sitting here question marks and we're just sitting here going, oh boy, I hope evil corporate Blizzard that's running Diablo Immortal over there doesn't fuck over our favorite game. And then, that's kind of it. That's all we can really say. But historically, when it comes to Overwatch, I'm not too worried about them going that crazy. Now, for overall monetization, though, there's a lot I could talk about there. But it just depends. If for now on the PvE side, I am not too worried about it. My main concern was mostly that I do want to have drops in some capacity, not as in like one bundle of a campaign to play, because I think it's more enjoyable from a playing experience to not get drip fed the entire time. That's all.
All right, so here's what I want to do. I want to try to put a pin in this PvE talk, and then I'm going to turn it back to you for general monetization. But let me riff a little bit on this, where there's a few things I'm going to pull from experience of the industry and watching how these things interact, but also think about how they have talked about the content delivery system for the game so far. So there's been a lot of articles written at the launch of Overwatch 2 where guys we've never heard of come out of the woodwork to do interviews to explain how they're speaking about this. So, for example, with new characters, they consider that the main content that you interact with. And there is a free route in the Battle Pass to get there. They, barely reduced it a little bit to 45, but they seemingly intend for you to buy the premium one. And this is a mistake I make, where when I say Battle Pass, really what I'm thinking in my head is paying $10 to get all these things. Whereas I don't even know really what the free one is, because I only really want to interact with the premium one as a hardcore fan. And that's a mistake I've made in analyzing this, because most of the free players aren't paying for it because they're by definition free. So the things they get in that free track is, disappointing to them. Now, I would imagine that they would try to weave in the PvE content similar in that same philosophy, where, as you're saying, there's probably going to be a tiered system where certain things are or aren't free based on how much it is or how complex it is. Whereas with the hero, it kind of makes sense to have a timed exclusivity, essentially was what it is, because if you play enough, you'll get them anyway. But I want to think to other games that I'm familiar with. The main game I covered on YouTube before doing Overwatch was Call of Duty for many years. And that game is kind of famous also in the Activision space for having expansion pack DLCs that extend out of the yearly COD cycle that did exist at one time. And it will give you extra maps or other content, was the general premise of that, which I think is important to look to, because this is another, Bobby Kotick thing that exists over here in Activision Blizzard. And a downside to that, though, is with the matchmaking, your player pop of players that bought all the maps is quite different than the one that only has the base game. And so as a content creator, what you might do is turn your DLC off or uninstall it, because you'll actually play with the normies and get easier lobbies. Like, that's one trick. So I want to use that to think to what could happen with this game, where if you're reducing the barrier, if you're increasing the barrier of entry for players in cooperative content, that makes it a little tricky, because those things have to be match made, right? So if you need to do co-op missions, you would almost imagine that it's to their benefit to make that open to more players. But as we're all kind of agreeing, like to some degree, the premium stuff has to come at a price tag. So that was sort of my speculation on how we can maybe...
I mean, aren't most co-op games paid? You have to pay for a box title. Left 4 Dead, Back 4 Blood, Dark Tide, like you pay whatever amount of money to just get in. It's not any different.
Right. Now, Seagull, monetization in general. I'll premise this with saying, the more generous the content is, I would imagine the more stingy and oppressive the whale hunting would be, which is to say, the more stuff they just put into the game, the more harsh the monetization will be on the cosmetic items. That would be how I would imagine it would have to scale, because I'd like to talk about this conversation in a what we can expect them to do reasonably and afford to pay their developers to keep publishing the game. This is why I was so strong on free to play, and maybe I'm not as critical as many on a skin costing $10 or something, or 20 in some cases. Like, I think that's somewhat reasonable to the industry standard. Now, I wish there was easier ways to earn stuff. I wish they improved that. I wish they made the battle pass features and challenges and ways to unlock, like, you know, there's like nothing. There's just the battle pass and 10 coins here or there. That's ridiculous. That's terrible. I hope they fix that. But in general, the premise of having premium optional content that if you're a diehard player, you pay into, I'm kind of okay with that because I'm used to it in CSGO where some gun skins are thousands of dollars. So I guess I'm desensitized to it. But where does that fall for you? Because Seagull, you don't like the monetization now, but we're trying to think of a world where they start having PvE, and we're uncertain what content it'll even be and what that price will be. But how do you think they fix this problem, essentially? Like, what would you like to see from the game moving forward into the next year?
They need to add more free currencies to the game, or any, really. They need to actually have some form of way for players to get items that is not from the battle pass. Well, that would be ideal. So that way players can choose what they want. I think that's very important. Outside of that, like, honestly, it's hard to talk about some of this stuff, but in general, I would say I don't actually care that much about. There's different levels of monetization here, where we can sit here and we can talk about, like, you know, it sucks the battle pass doesn't let me buy another battle pass. But at the same time, the catch for that is, well, this game's version of the highest end cosmetic, aka heirloom and other games, that's a price $100 to $50, $200 in games like Apex, is just at the end of the battle pass in this game. And so that's kind of the catch, right? And so you could kind of give, and I have a lot of conflicting thoughts about the battle pass because there's a lot of things I like about it, and there's a lot of things I don't like about it when it comes to monetization in Overwatch. So as an example, I really appreciate the fact that they don't have stupidly highly priced items to bait whales. I just don't like that, seeing that stuff in video games in general. Oh yeah, this is a $300 skin, go nuts. And the fact they don't have that in Overwatch, I appreciate. But at the same time, I don't appreciate the fact that everything in the game must come from the battle pass, because that feels a little bit lame, that I can't just go buy a voice line with free currency that I get. That isn't just, oh, I got, 50 coins this week. Maybe next week when I get my other 60 cents, I can get another voice line. That's just dumb. It's a little bit too stingy. And then there's the other side of things. That's, the whole gameplay should never be in a battle pass or time gated whatsoever. I have a personal line where I don't care about cosmetics as much. The fact that cosmetics are $20, it's stupid, but it's also just kind of sad. But it's not about us, it's about the business, and the fact that there's tons of people who buy them. I see them literally every game. And so if people keep buying them at those prices, they're going to keep selling them at those prices. And I can rage at that, but I'm not going to rage at the developer for doing it. I'm just going to be sad about, more generally, the world and how sad the gaming industry has become in general, that people are more and more willing to pay $20 for skins. And yeah, there's a lot of topics to talk about when it comes to this stuff. But in general, I would say Overwatch monetization, I don't consider, personally to me, to be bad, except for the lack of a free currency, the fact that it all comes down to the battle pass, and gameplay should never be in the battle pass for any reason or time gated. I do not like heroes being there. I don't like the fact that that's being used as incentive to buy. I don't like it. That feels gross. Outside of that, don't care as much.
Flats, anything on this?
I think I agree with everything Seagull just said. I mean, most people know my thoughts on a lot of this stuff, but you bring up a good point of the free currency is, like, honestly, Overwatch 2 does have a big problem, like lack of progression. They removed the borders and stuff like that. Like, that's fine. Like, but we had no replacement. It's just the battle pass. Like, it's everything is centric to the battle pass at all times. And like games like Apex, right, which do have those like whale things, like there's like $150 Wraith skin now. Like, now they're getting into the skin game, getting really expensive. But you can also level up and get crafting materials and like buy things that you kind of want. And I think one of the most sour things I saw from Overwatch 1 to Overwatch 2 was watching old skins that have been around for like 3 years that just instantly got priced the same thing as the brand new one. It's like, come on, like you could have done so much better with this. You could have made it so that you could have like a free currency and have like all these free to play players grinding and being able to get some of the old skins. And I bet you they still would buy the new ones. Like they would still do it because the Overwatch cosmetic team and the skins is genuinely some of the best out there. I would say rivals like Fortnite, and Fortnite, the only reason I would say maybe even has an edge is because they cross brand with so many other competitors that you have like these crazy like skins from other like brands that you can love, and like you're connected to them as well. So it's like, you know, I understand that, but like Overwatch always has been so ahead in that department. So people are always going to buy them. And it's like, I do think there's something to be said about like, you know, like, oh, like, you know, I played CS, like I'm normalized at this price. It's like, yeah, but like that doesn't make it better though. And it's like, it's the other games do it, doesn't mean our game should do it. And it's like on top of that too, you know, games like CS have been around for so many years. I don't think it's totally fair to compare them because their culture changed very differently with it, and they had their own problems with monetization. And you know, I could argue that they have their own issues with like, you know, the crate openings, and I'm not going to go near that right now. But point is though, I do want to see, I would love to see some type of way that you could even earn like skins better, because like that was something they took out and they started to bring it back, like the Ice Queen break, which I actually have to do, but like that they used to do that a lot more. It's like you just play the game or do like certain challenges or whatever, like you got something rewarded. That was nice. And I thought that even in the Halloween edition, like we got the Captain Reaper skin as like an apology, and the medic the health pack weapon charm, they didn't like advertise that to you. It just appeared in your thing. And there's probably so many players out there that didn't even know they got those skins for free. And it's like they need to, like, they're kind of shooting themselves in the foot a little bit. It's like, you know, tell people like, oh, hey, you just got this for free, like as like a gift, you know, whatever it is. And then also have ways for people to earn things besides 60 cents a week, because like that is just like you got to play for like 38 weeks to get one singular bundle skin, because you can't buy it by itself because that's the same price as the bundle. So you might as well buy the bundle anyways. That's on sale, but not actually on sale. Like, come on, like we need something else here. Let's be realistic. So I hope that there's some more progression things, and I would love to see like a hero challenge. You know how like COD has like skin challenges, like weapon challenges, like, you know, get like, it used to be the old tigers, you know, like get certain headshots with weapons, you get red tiger, blue tiger, you know what I mean, stuff like that. What if you got like, if you played like 1,000 games as tank, you got a cool skin? Like that'd be awesome, you know, like stuff like that. So I don't know, things that
those queue times go up, bro.
Like every, you know, like every role.
Haven't
like,
played support, but yeah.
Different. Characters could have some problems because it's like, you know, like you start playing a bunch of games on Mercy, but you don't play Mercy because you're trying to get the skin, and it's like, you know, like but people, but if you don't want to play Mercy, like you can make it like role based. Like if you play 500 hours, 1,000 hours, or sorry, games like 500 games, 1,000 games, 2,000 games, like those would be like super prestigious things that you could earn. Like that'd be awesome. So I don't know, that's my take on it.
AVRL, anything on monetization?
Absolutely. Some of it will be rehashing some points that have been talked about. I think we're generally all on the same page. Like we all agree that some of the monetization in Overwatch 2 is fairly aggressive, maybe in a negative way, and that they need to do something in terms of progression for free to play. So what I'm going to dive into is I'm going to break it down like this. From my perspective, free to play is required for this game to exist. I'd love to hear if you guys disagree with this, but to exist, and I think 2022 in the modern gaming world, if your game is as a multiplayer, especially a multiplayer shooter game, if it's not a free to play game, I don't think it's going to have longevity. It needs to be free to play to be able to compete with the other big titles out there, like the Apexes, like the Valorants, to have that level of longevity, to have a game that will still exist in several years' time. Like we want this game to exist in 10 years' time. No, like that should be the goal. And to get there, I think free to play is necessary. Now, along with free to play means that you have to deal with the evil that comes along with it, which is MTX. Like, because how they support free to play, how they support the game and the development comes to the MTX. It just comes down to like, well, what is the level of MTX, and how do they how aggressive is it? How egregious is it? And that's a sliding scale. and I'm always going to end up comparing it to other games because it's like, technically speaking, I don't know how many people here are involved in Valorant. That's probably my other game. If I was going to say I've been involved in any other game, it's been Valorant. It's their free to play model in terms of how aggressive it is, objectively worse. You want to talk about like, oh, earn 60 cents whatever a month, whatever. It's like, bro, you couldn't even get that in Valorant. You get nothing. How about just zero? Instead of 60 cents, how about zero? That's Valorant. You know what I'm saying? Like, you can't even just get a skin unless you want to pay for it. Now, we can get into the discussion like, okay, well, we shouldn't copy other games. That's fine, but here's the problem with how business works is games like that prove that it works, right? Because when I first started in Valorant, when it released, and I was like, this is ridiculous. There's no way people are buying these skins. They're way overpriced. We're talking like super expensive skins. There's no way. And then people did. People bought the heck out of those skins, and they still line up in droves to buy it every single drop. Every single drop. I can't explain it. So I don't know. Like it's proven that it works from a business sense, and it's hard to be as a business. It's hard to look at that and be like, no, we don't want to make money. It's like it's very easy to look at that and be like, no, of course. Like if it clearly works, it's what the market's going towards. It's what Seagull was saying. It's like even though it's sad that humanity and gaming has gone in this direction, people keep buying the skins. They keep buying those $20 skins, or maybe even more if we're talking about other games. So that's what the companies are going to keep doing. I mean, people can vote with their wallets, but most people vote in the wrong direction, apparently. Flats?
Okay. Just one thing really fast. 'Cause I hear what you're saying. I fundamentally kind of disagree with some of it. Like, you're not wrong. Like, realistically, like, they probably could get away with worse things, but it's like I don't think that should happen. But like what I want to like kind of reiterate really fast is like with the way Overwatch rewards free incentives is you don't get to even choose what you're getting.
I was going to get to that. I was going to talk about the free part as that as well. But like, yeah, like sure. In theory, like, no, we shouldn't do that. But it's like, well, do you want to make money? Like, I'm not, when I say you is like, hello developers, do you want to make money? Like, it could be better. Like, could they offer more for free? And that's why I think like the real area they need to target, because I'm not just out here defending the monetization model. I'm saying it's necessary, but I'm also saying there's ways to improve it for sure. I'm not saying that the way it is right now is the way that it should be. And the way to improve it is to a couple of things. One, we've already talked about what free currency is. I think there's they can definitely do something with the legacy coins. Like, why is that not? That should just be a free currency. The legacy coins that got brought over could be spent as free currency. I personally believe that all of the Overwatch 1 content, I'm talking all the skins, voice lines, whatever, should all be able to be purchased with legacy coins. You should be able to earn legacy coins through gameplay. They don't have to give you a lot, but they can give you a reasonable amount that you can buy an Overwatch 1 legendary skin within a reasonable amount of time. That should be a thing that exists in the game, but that'll allow people to at least get something or work towards something, and then they can just make all the Overwatch 2 skins or the new skins paid. And I think that'd be a reasonable compromise. It's also reasonably rewarding for the Overwatch 1 players that banked up a lot of legacy coins, because now that actually means something. They were rewarded for their time in Overwatch 1 as well. You could even allow hero purchases with the legacy coins. Let's say you can drop, I don't want to put down a number because I don't know what the effective number is, but let's say you could, the new hero drops a season, boom, spend your legacy coins and just instantly unlock that. You don't even need to buy a battle pass. You can just do that. There's multiple ways they can work with like a free currency that they haven't explored at all. I just think it's a mistake that they haven't looked at that.
For me, I feel the reality of how hard and big development is in the modern age. Like, I think, especially if you're an older gamer, you might long for the days that a team of 10 can, like, or whatever it was, make Doom or all the indie games that exist that are made by one guy. But the realities of keeping up with the Joneses of Fortnite and Destiny and etc., big teams. So I guess I'm more willing for the cost of things to be reasonable to that degree, but obviously more can be done so that it doesn't feel so painful to interact with. That's for sure. So I look forward to them improving this next year, because they seem to. Now, this is always the easy way to view anything Blizzard does: crawl, walk, run. Okay, they say this publicly. This is their internal philosophy, has been for years. I'm hoping that reducing the level for gaining the new hero in the battle pass being reduced is the crawl, because we haven't really seen anything massive change. A couple other crawl things, maybe like the bundle thing might have got reworked a little bit. You can buy it out of the bundle, I believe. But as Flat said, it's like not that big of a discount anyway, so you might as well still buy the bundle. But I believe you had to buy the bundle originally. Am I correct on that? Like on some of those skins or something like that?
Well, it's actually worse now. So the bundle was 1900 for like, let's say the bundle was 1900, and then you could go into the hero gallery and buy the skin for 1900. So,
what is that?
Get the bundle for 1900.
That's nonsense, right? Like that obviously doesn't make sense.
They just price the bundle the same as the characters or whatever else. Yes. Yeah. In that way, it's just like a legal technicality or some nonsense. Who knows? The issue is, I think everyone can agree that the game needs to be free to play and they need to monetize cosmetics and they need to monetize all this stuff in different ways. It's just that they consistently go over the edge just a little bit that they don't have to, when previously that edge used to be the other way. It used to be that Overwatch was under monetized in comparison to its competitors, and now they're going a little bit over in certain circumstances compared to their competitors. The examples that we're giving, like no free currency, the fact that they're time gating characters, and to give you an example here, and this is why I'm passionate specifically on just the gameplay angle, because I feel like that for me is just the biggest thing. Is Valorant and Apex, you can unlock characters faster than you can in Overwatch. And I think that's really sad when Overwatch characters are so much more meaningful to the base game than they are in other games. That should just not be a thing. So,
can I add that, like, the reason why they've gone over this is my speculation. The reason why they've gone over the line, even if it's just by a margin, is because it's easier to start on that side of the line than the other way around. Like, you can't under monetize and then say, oh no, we're going to increase the prices now. It's easier for them to make it bad and then make it better, right? I'm not saying that that's what they should be doing, but I'm kind of like, in my opinion, that's the justification.
I can see it, but it doesn't. I'm still going to complain. There's a lot of
absolutely.
The
I'm not saying it's good. I'm just saying that's probably what they're doing.
I think that applies to things like prices and stuff like that, and I know you're right. They could still change a lot of this stuff, and I know what you're saying, but also I don't think that applies to systems nearly as much. And the systems being that we want everything to go in the pass, right? We want you to just no more progression. You go to the battle pass and you enjoy it. It's just weird. It's very weird.
Yeah, fair enough.
Yeah, I feel I have been convinced that the reality is cosmetics don't earn enough alone, and that must be their conclusion as well. That this is the type of game where if you don't have Iron Man as a buyable skin or whatever it is, then you have to charge for content in some way. That's the conclusion they're saying. Now maybe that's not true, and maybe we could have a free character but more expensive skins. Maybe more people would like that, but this is the direction they went, and I almost think I personally like this more, where there's like a more reasonable price that you pay, because like the assumption is just get the $10 battle pass and get the character anyway. But we can't have everything. Like there's going to be trade-offs somewhere, and so we'll see what adjustments they make into the next year. I want to make a small mini final thoughts section here now, where I want us all to give the year so far for Overwatch 2 a grade and a few bullet points of why you did that, or give him that grade. So personally, I'm going to say Overwatch 2, the launch and how they've adjusted. This might be a little high for some people, but I'm going to say B-. And the reason for me is that when the game isn't poorly balanced, in my opinion, I have a ton of fun. Like there's a lot of characters that are really fun. I think the vision for the PvP has been actualized in many ways, and the game has been centered around fun mechanics, generally speaking. And as long as it's tuned appropriately, I have a lot of fun with it. There's a long way for them to go, a lot of things I want them to develop over time, but as long as they hotfix the game quickly, I'm pretty happy to keep playing it for a long time, personally. So I'll go to AVRL now. What do you think about the year so far? What grade do you give it, and why?
I'm leaning somewhere between B plus A minus. Wait, what would be the highest, just so I know what the scale is?
I don't know, A or S, whatever you want it to be. It's your grade.
Okay, if S is what? I'm just gonna make it. No, if S is the highest, I think I'd be okay with like.
You want me to come back to you?
No, let's just
I'm
let's just
breaking
do
your
B plus.
brain here.
I think the reason is here's what I say. I think 5v5 is generally good for the game, and that was the correct call to make. I think free to play is the correct call to make for the game as well. Could they do much better with monetization? Absolutely. Some of the balance patches throughout Overwatch 2 so far has not been amazing. But so there's a lot of room for improvement. But generally speaking, I think outside of some of the tech issues on launch has been good, and the game has been doing much better. I think there's a lot of room for growth, and I don't know. I still have a level of optimism in there because there still is that extra card hidden under the table, which is the PvE, and that is going to be quite telling. So, yeah.
Flats. Grade for Overwatch 2. Do we have flat? Hello?
Yeah. No, I'm.
Oh, your camera's frozen for me in a thinking face, and I'm like, you look very contemplative.
It's hard to say. I don't know if I want to even use the word optimistic, but I'm probably on, at least in this group, the optimistic end. I think that Overwatch is going to be fine for years. I think that honestly, our problems are so minuscule and compared to the overall greater game. It's kind of hilarious, but sucks for us because it's just going to make our lives just miserable. I would say that Overwatch, I'd probably give it about a B. Somebody TTS at the same size said give it an F. Said that perfectly. I'd say probably like a B. I would say that because there are small glimmers of hope. Like for example, the hotfix, right? Like normally Blizzard's stance whenever they release a big patch is they take time, they wait a week or two, they gather data, and they take the data, then they go and they go to test the data, and then they go internally and start trying to balance, and they play test all the changes that they made, do a bunch of play tests, then they show the public like, okay, here it is. And then before we used to have the PTR, and then we'd go on the PTR and play it for like a day or two, and then 2 weeks later we'd get like it would take forever. Like we wouldn't see patches for the longest amounts of time. And with like what they had said with a big seasonal patch and a mid-season patch, it felt like that's all we were going to get, and it wasn't enough. And they recognized it wasn't enough and gave us this hotfix. And they explained, and they came on, like, it obviously didn't reach everybody, but I was lucky enough to have Alec on my stream, made a video and stuff like that of it, and like explained like yes, they are trying to actually fix this right now, but like the holidays and stuff like that, and they communicated that, which is like not stuff we've ever had before. So I would say I'm on the more optimistic side long term. In the short term, just way worse. Like game is a little bit boring at the moment. Matchmaker doesn't feel that fun. Games are very wonky. Across the ranks, people like there's this, like we saw from the competitive blog, like you can end up having someone on your team, like let's say you're GM and you have, or top 500, and you have someone on your team that was like, I don't know, plat, and it's like they just haven't played games yet this season, but their MMR is actually GM, so you don't know who you're playing with, and then you can go whole stream sessions of 7 hours, 10 hours, and not get a single re-rank. And then even if you do get a re-rank, you might not even move, even though you went like 7 and 4 or something like that. And you don't understand because they're not telling you, because they're afraid that you're going to get the numbers. The numbers are scary. I don't want to see the number. Like, you know, it's like I'm going to get scared of the numbers going down. You know, like there's just so many things that, like, I understand what they're doing. They're trying to make the game better. They're trying to make it so that, you know, more casual players start playing comp, which is great because they get more invested in the game. And most players, when they play comp and they have a better experience, because, like, you know, they're winning, they care more, they want to learn about the game. You can get them out of that bronze 5 tier faster, maybe, because they're like, you know, they have to keep up because they're punished for their mistakes. Because in quick play, you don't get punished for your mistakes as often because some people take it seriously, most people dick around. You know, it's like there's a lot of things that they're working on at once and they're trying to keep it moving. But God, it sucks and it's painful right now and it's not fun. But I think in the long term, I think we're going to be more than fine. I'm glad that they're trying to move a little bit quicker. They're trying to be a little more communicative. Like you said earlier, it's this crawl, walk, run. I think they're like just starting to get off all fours and starting to work towards like the standing position on like talking about things and starting to, like, you know, be a little bit better about it. But that being said, there isn't an excuse for certain things like Sojourn dominating the game, like into season 2. Season 1, understandable. Into season 2, even the most recent fix patch, we didn't know till we got it. But it's like it's better, but like you still have the same problem with the Mercy Sojourn. It's like, is that a fundamental misunderstanding about Sojourn, or is it because in the lower ranks she actually doesn't one-tap people, so they don't want to remove the core part of her kit? Like, which one is it? And it's like, if it's the second one, we all need to have a shift on what we think of this game is going to end up being, and how we think things are going to be in the future, because otherwise we're going to all mentally implode. So I'm in this weird spot where, do I go towards Seagull and start me understanding, yes, like this isn't for us anymore, like they're balancing about everyone else, or do I swing back the other way and it's like, this is going to be a great competitive game, and like, everything's amazing and I love playing comp for 10 hours a day again. Where am I? I'm in the middle somewhere. So I'll give it a B. It's not the worst thing ever. I've had a great year. It's been a struggle of a year, but I'd rather be where we are now than where we were in Overwatch 1. So realistically, I feel bad even complaining.
Those were a lot of bullet points, ladies and gentlemen. This why this man is.
I haven't said that much.
Yeah, I said he's been quiet.
Yeah, you're right. Well said, Flats. I love talking to you, man. That was all great. Okay, Seagull. Grade for the game. You could go as long as Flats if you want. You can go longer if you want. We're pretty positive so far. I mean, we had a launch that was like panned in the media, a lot of problems. I just sort of expect launch issues. The hotfix system didn't work. A lot of disappointing things technically with the game, characters being removed and whatnot. Like, none of us have mentioned any of these things in our grade, and I think almost it's because we're looking towards the future. So
it's because no one cares about May.
We don't want to play against May anyway. All right, Seagull, grade for the game.
What? So grade for the game so far, or grade for the game on a general level is another good question to that.
Whatever you like, man. I mean, you're free to be like, I wanted a different game and this isn't it. Like, what, you're free to.
I mean, that's true. No PvE. I mean, automatically the game gets cut in half, so it's a C right there. It's monetization is horrible for consumers compared to the last game. Yeah, it deserves the C rank just from those two things alone. But on the gameplay side of things, which I think is the fundamental part of it, like, I wouldn't be touching this game if they didn't nerf shields and CC and go to 5v5 ever again. I did not play it for literal years before they changed the game in that way. So I can hate and dislike parts of it, but I can also still appreciate the fact that the gameplay has significantly improved to the point where I can actually play the game and enjoy it, even though it's kind of, in my view, downgraded to the original in so many other ways. So overall, I think probably C, B minus, somewhere around there. It's hard to say because it really depends on how you weigh things in general. Like, do you weigh gameplay? In my view, I weigh gameplay above anything else. And so in many ways, on the gameplay side of things, I consider Overwatch to be like an S+ improvement over Overwatch 1 in so many ways, right? The adjustment from 6s to 5s, and you have less CC and no double shields, the more ability to have solo carry potential, all those things that actually gets me to play the game again regularly. That's awesome. But so much about that surrounds the game is a lot of BS that I don't like. And it gets difficult too to talk about these topics like the matchmaker too, because some of these topics, like for again, rankings and ranking systems, I consider the Overwatch 1 ranking system to be essentially perfect. I did not actually know of any way to significantly improve it. There's obviously improvements in matchmaking, right? But the rank system, just having a number that just like goes up or goes down, and that's it. It was very pure, and I appreciated that. And to see so much of Overwatch over the years, it feels like it has caught so much of the gaming industry's general sense of things. Like, oh yeah, this used to be the game that didn't have all the shenanigans, and it was very honestly ethical in a lot of ways. It did stuff to kind of go down the lines of like, yeah, we're gonna put the hero on the battle pass. Yeah, you're gonna have to pay for all your skins now. You used to get them for free, and all of the bullshit attached, but you're still gonna play it because we made the gameplay itself better, and that a lot of that BS is actually fueling our future progression, that you will actually continue to play our game because now we have an incentive, a business incentive to continually update. Yeah, it's probably like a B- or something.
You worked all your way to the same grade as me. Are you kidding me? You that had an entire plot line, bro. Like it went left and right.
Gameplay's varying. If it didn't have a significant improvement for gameplay, oh my god, I would go insane. It'd be horrible. Like I would never. Yeah, just that I cannot stress enough how different it is, and I think a lot of those gameplay changes also fuel a lot of the issues that we have of matchmaking now as a final note. I think it's very interesting now. I don't think matchmaking has fundamentally changed in Overwatch. I don't think the rank system has fundamentally changed either, other than adding a nice label on the front, right? They're like, oh, you're not 3000 SR, you're now diamond, right? Or diamond, 3 or 2. You get the idea.
And the fake thing resets, but it was fake anyway, so yes.
Yeah, well, that's a whole topic we forgot about. I think was matchmaking. That's a fun one. But in general, though, I think a lot of that 5v5 and solo carry potential it does bring in its own issues to the game too. Right now, I'm still seeing the highs of it, right? Because I'm comparing relatively to the end of Overwatch 1, which was a lot of double shield, a lot of shenanigans, and stuff like that. But as I play Overwatch 2 more, I am noticing more of the flaws with 5v5 as well, which is supports. You don't feel like you do anything. You're just kind of hanging out, trying not to die. And I find it very interesting that all the meta support characters are the ones that are the most difficult to kill, and their entire role doesn't seem to be hard carry as much as it is just don't die and enable someone else, right? And so in a lot of cases, it's a DPS games now, a DPS player's game. And so when we talk about the matchmaker and the matchmaker having issues, I find it very interesting that the first thing Blizzard does is they go, yeah, we now are doing matchmaking in between roles. Because I think they themselves see that too in the data. So, yeah, I think we're going to see the flaws of 5v5 and more solo carry and the game adapting to it and all that stuff in the long run, which is why, all this stuff I consider bad about Overwatch and how it got here and blah, blah, blah. If I compared it to the original vision of Overwatch 2 and all this other stuff in the last 4 years of waiting, this game is like a D. But I put that stuff to the side and I look at just the game, the monetization, everything. I think C to B minus around there is okay. And the horrible launch aside, I don't care about that personally. Yeah, I think that's where I'm at.
I think this also speaks to the state of the industry as well, where we're all pretty high on the gameplay, at least the fundamentals, there's flaws, etc. But when Overwatch 1 came out, I think it was like a weak few years for shooter games. Whereas now, being S tier in your gameplay, it's like, well, there's a lot of games that feel S tier, so that's not enough for a lot of people. So I'm interested in what they do next time. I think I'm going to cut the show here. We've raised a lot of stuff for maybe subsequent shows and conversations that I hope they address in future with supports and matchmaking and whatnot. I'll open the floor to anyone who wants to shout out anything right before we go. Is there any last comment we want to make, or any shout outs that we say hi mom or anything like that? Hi mom.
Hi mom.
Thanks for joining me, everybody. I really enjoyed this conversation. And for those watching on Seagull and Flats' stream, thanks for tuning in. And I got my own. We're talking about terrible launches. This podcast had a terrible launch. We weren't able to do it live. So catch you guys next time.
Keep all of it. It's going to be awesome. Right at the end.
Later.